What's up, Chaos Shinobi here. This is what if Naruto was a prodigy like Minato Namikaze. Summary: what would have happened if Naruto had a different childhood? Instead of taking after his mother in personality, what if he not only looked like his dad but had a similar personality too? As well as being supported by the Sarutobi clan. Chapter 1. The light shining through the canopy of leaves littered the ground with the cooling hues of green. The trees that make up this canopy are ancient, easily over 1,000 years old, towering above the tiny figure basking in the safe warmth this cocoon of nature has made. The child, for only a child can be so small, sat in the alcove of the gathering of trees reading from a battered and worn book, its spine cracked from overuse. He wore an old white t-shirt, which was slightly splattered with the dirt of the ground, with a red spiral seemingly painted on taking up the center of his top and also the only color displayed on the child. His shorts were duller in color, gray with grass stains on his rear where he had sat upon the ground for so long. His feet were covered by the mud-caked sandals indistinguishable in color. Atop his head sat his shaggy blonde hair constantly disheveled no matter how many times it was brushed. Occasionally the bangs of his hair would drop into his amazing blue eyes, which he'd quickly and forcefully puff out of his way before he'd continue reading his book. His tanned skin, easily noticeable in the mid-morning light, was wrinkled in great concentration as his eyes consumed the text before him. The crunching of the crisp new grass alerted the blonde to another presence in his little alcove of the forest. The stranger drew closer till the sound of their footsteps stopped. The boy finished his thorough investigation and glanced up from underneath his bangs at the newcomer. Naruto, the old man puffed, serenely on his pipe, sinking down to the child's level and leaning back against the tree the youngster was sat against. For one so young, you certainly are a hard one to find, he stated whilst glancing at his blonde acquaintance. Reading that book again, are we? Sometimes I wonder why you like that book so much. He chuckled kindly. I think it's time for a mid-morning snack, don't you, Naruto? Again he glanced down at the boy who was fast approaching the age of 4. Cookies and milk? Naruto replied, finally looking away from his book and showing his gleaming blue eyes. Of course, one's never too old for cookies and milk, the older of the two replied, pushing himself up from the ground while taking a puff on his pipe and extending his gnarled hand to the boy. With a grin spread across his whiskered face, the boy jumped up, tucking the book close to his body, and took the man's hand in his own. Sunlight streamed through the window, cascading across a desk overflowing with scrolls and paperwork. The leather-backed swivel chair occupied by a familiar old man, the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi, turned from signing papers to a surrogate grandson Naruto Uzumaki, who was at that moment dunking his cookie into his glass of milk as most children do, with adamant delight. Half the cookie was dunked repeatedly before finding its way into the blonde's open mouth. The Hokage chuckled at this display of childish antiques. Naruto glanced up briefly to see the Hokage also dunking his cookies into his glass of milk. He fought back a yawn, picking up his book and continuing to read from where he left off. The Hokage filled up his pipe with dried leaves and packing them in tightly before using a match to light it. Taking a few puffs, he turned back to the sofa, to be met with an adorable sight. Naruto was curled up in the very corner of the sofa, very much how a cat does, with his eyes half-lidded and head tilted slightly, and the Hokage's spear robes dwarfed the boy, which made the entire picture that much more adorable, especially when Naruto yawned and shook his head slightly, trying to stay awake. He also noticed that Naruto had a milk mustache from the earlier snack. That boy never ceases to amaze me. How did he get my spare robes? The Hokage thought. He watched as Naruto lost his battle with sleep and his head lolled to the side. Small breathing noises evened out, showing that the boy was resting. With a small thump, the book that Naruto had been reading fell to the floor, landing face down. The Hokage pushed himself out of his chair away from the demanding pile of paperwork. He moved quietly round his desk to the sofa, grabbing the blanket draped across the back for just such an instance, and wrapped the blanket across the blonde. He softly carted his hand through the child's hair. Smiling at his innocence, crouching down, he retrieved the book, glancing towards the cover, then placing it on the armrest above the boy's head. The title read The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja. He chuckled before returning to his chair. He sighed before starting on the paperwork, which was mounted haphazardly yet organized on his desk. Naruto slowly woke, rubbing at his eyes gingerly. He looked up, glancing around the room. Where was his book? What happened to the Hokage robes he was wearing? And where did the blanket that was pulled around his waist come from? You know you can read other books besides that one? The Hokage replied, raising the hand that wasn't busy signing the paperwork, and pointed to the arm of the sofa where the book was situated. There are several bookcases stored in this room with books in them that you haven't yet read. His hand then waved vaguely around the room. Besides the desk that with its never-ending piles of paperwork and sofa, there were 2 bookcases in the room, as well as a nice little piano which was quite easily hidden behind the door. It was old but very well looked after, although it had been some time since it was last played. A month at least. The 2 bookcases, one tall and wide behind and to the left of the desk near the sofa, and the other, short and skinny, facing across from the sofa. They were both crammed full to the brim with books and the occasional scroll hanging out or on one of the many shelves. Stretching and twisting and turning like a cat, Naruto rose from the sofa over to the smaller of the two bookcases, scanning the shelves for something he hadn't read. He scanned the shelves at least twice before one book caught his eye. He'd read everything in this particular bookshelf except this one. Its bright orange cover was what drew him in. He was slightly more partial to orange than most. Then the author of the book, it was the same as his favorite, maybe it was a sequel. He slid it from its place in the bookshelf. The Hokage was signing away. He completed a stack and a half of paperwork when a soft cough caught his attention. Anbu don't normally draw attention to themselves, so why would? Looking up, he saw Naruto with a familiar orange book in his hands. The Hokage's eyes widened. That's why the Anbu got his attention. Just as Naruto was about to open the book, it was no longer in his hands. Instead, the Hokage stood ruffled with the book in his hands, his eyes wide. Naruto, where did you get this book? Do you realize that this book is not for children's eyes? What were you thinking? The Hokage all but screamed. Naruto mutely pointed to the bookcase beside them where a gap had appeared, signaling that the book had once resided there. Then it clicked. Naruto was barely 4 years old. Of course he didn't know that he wasn't to read the certain books till he was older. Wait, the book was found in his bookcase, but his copy of the book was in his desk, third drawdown, concealed by a genjutsu. How did the book get here? Kneeling down so that he was level with Naruto and placing his hands on either side of his arms. I'm sorry, Naruto, I didn't mean to scare you. It was wrong of me to shout like that. I was shocked to see you holding this book is all. It should never have been in the bookcase in the first place. Why don't you pick out a different book? Naruto, still encased in the Hokage's arms, turned his head to the bookcase, gazing at the titles before turning his head back to the Hokage and shaking his head. But Naruto, why? Read, he signed. What, all of them? The boy nodded. What about the other bookcase? He inclined with his head. This time the boy shook his head. Standing with cracking knees, the Hokage guided the small child over to the second bookcase, which was filled with more scrolls than it was books. Picking one out, he held it out to the blonde. What about this one? He asked. The child nodded and took the book entitled Koona, A History. Moving over to the sofa, he took his seat in the corner and began reading. With another tired sigh, Sarutobi moved back over to his desk. Dropping into his chair, he pulled open the third drawdown, released the genjutsu, and was amazed to discover his copy of the orange book currently in his hand was exactly where he left it. Where did this one come from then? Sighing, he reapplied the genjutsu, closed the drawer, and summoned an Anbu to get rid of the orange book known as Icha Paradise before once again commencing with his paperwork. The soft hum of voices wandering up the corridor alerted Sarutobi that his Jonin meeting was soon to commence. He ran a wrinkled old hand down his face. Jonins, although at the top of the carrier chain mainly, could act very childish if things didn't go their way. He shuddered at the memory of the last meeting and its resulting actions. He signaled to the Anbu stationed at his door to open it for the approaching shinobi. The horde of chattering Jonin and special Jonin descended into the room. With a patient gaze and intense glare, the Hokage quickly silenced the room, clearing his throat, and just as he opened his mouth to speak, a low rumbling growl filled the room. Every head turned in the direction of the sofa where Naruto was still sat reading, although sheepishly, as his stomach had interrupted the meeting. Naruto, I forgot you were sitting there. Why don't you run off and grab some lunch? I'll pay. Just ask Tucci to put it on my tab. The Hokage smiled gently at the boy. Sheepishly, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Placing the book down, he uncurled himself from his cat-like position on the sofa and steadily made his way towards the door while the entire room watched his every move. A clearing of the throat stopped the boy in his tracks. Turning, he raised his head to face the Hokage. Aren't you forgetting something, Naruto? The Hokage inclined. A confused expression appeared on Naruto's face. Then when the Hokage held his arms out, the light dawned. He gave a quick glance to the other occupants of the room, turned a pleading look to the old man who just held out his arms and twitched them, indicating a yes, I'm serious look to the boy. Embarrassedly, Naruto made his way over to the old man, clambered into his lap where he received a grandfatherly hug. What grandchild doesn't give his grandfather a goodbye hug? But I am not your grandson, Naruto signed shyly back. Maybe not by blood, no. But to me you will always be my grandson. He squeezed a little tighter before releasing the boy from his hold. Now be off with you, go eat some food and remember it's on my tab. The retreating blonde merely raised a hand in acknowledgement, book ducked under his arm, before disappearing out the door with a click, shut it behind him. The lone figure glided silently over the rooftops, stopping every once in a while to look down around him. Not seeing what he was looking for, the figure moved on. Within a short space of time the figure had arrived on top of a building where 3 other figures were waiting. He inclined his head and each of the other figures replied with a negative response. They gazed about the village before disappearing off into different directions. Each figure was on the lookout for a small blonde-haired boy, At the request of the Hokage. That was this morning with a few chunin. As the search progressed, the Anbu had been called in. It was fast approaching the evening. They had searched most of the village including the orphanage and the forest. Neither of these places held their elusive charge. The banners of the festival below hindered their search. Trust the child to wander off on the eve of the new year. Well, December 30th anyway, the child had always been a hard one to find. Shaking his head, he turned in the direction of the village gates where a brief chakra flare had alerted his attention. High up in a tree overlooking the gates of Koona stood a blonde-haired boy clinging onto the trunk of the tree while hanging precariously out on one foot to see past the gates. All he wanted to see was what was outside of the gates. He'd never set foot outside the village, but he was curious. Mainly trees, I suppose that comes with living in the village hidden in the leaves. A shift of pressure on the branch alerted Naruto that he had been found by someone from the way the branch was beginning to groan and how silently the individual had arrived. He'd say it was one of the masked ones, a male one too. Sheepishly he raised his hand to the back of his head and turned while rubbing at it. Then with an almighty crack, the branch that Naruto and the masked one were on snapped, causing both to fall rather unflatteringly towards the ground. The Anbu maneuvered his body into a position that would allow him to land more gracefully as well as being able to grab the blonde child who was falling alongside him. But Naruto was no longer falling, his eyes were closed and he had spread his arms wide almost like he was flying. The look of serene peace on his face startled the masked one. Naruto then opened his eyes and with meticulous feline grace arranged his body so that he would land without injury. The Anbu landed beside the crouched figure of the 4-year-old. Who would have thought a 4-year-old with that much grace snapping out of his thoughts when the child tugged at his pant leg and tilted his head inquiringly up at him. The Hokage has requested your presence, although we are rather late as he asked for you this morning. The Anbu signed to the blonde, who smiled sheepishly again before walking in the direction of the village. The Anbu signaled to the figures stood on the roof and when they disappeared followed after the boy. The village was in a constant buzz of movement with the merchants and traders shouting and calling, wrapping and stacking, racking and selling, the villagers running around buying and packing, shouting and arguing, browsing and gossiping. The decorations were amazing. The villagers had really gone all out this year. There were blue and silver banners draping the marketplace, balloons with assorted colors although mostly consisted of blue, white and silver, streamers, and was that a firework? It truly was amazing. But what do you expect? Not only is it almost New Year, but it's not every day that the Hokage's grandchild is born. A boy from all the blue that is decorating the village. The ground was glistening and sparkling in the winter sun's glow, and the two figures walking through the village were getting some rather disapproving looks. The blonde who had been gazing around eyes wide in wonderment and joy slowly began to shrink into himself, eyes receding in size and mouth closing into a smaller more cautious smile, till it seemed the child had all but disappeared, allowing the disparaging looks to pass over him as though he wasn't there. The Anbu watched all this happen in but a moment and had to look to make sure the child was still walking by his side. Angrily he sent a chakra flare towards the villagers, but when he looked back towards his blonde-haired charge he found he had flinched away. He's sensitive to chakra and graceful as a cat already? He stopped releasing his chakra and watched as the child physically relaxed. They carried on walking through the village passing all manner of shops and vendors when Naruto suddenly stopped. The Anbu who had carried on walking glanced back to see that Naruto was staring into a shop window. As he walked back to where the child was he found that it was in fact a toy shop, with lots of different cuddly animals displayed in the window. Naruto was cutely biting his lip while looking through his frog purse and contemplating whether he'd be able to afford it. The Anbu knelt down beside him, looked up at the display and tried to figure out what had the boy so enraptured. What is it? The boy's eyes widened when he realizes that the masked one is still there, and then he pointed to the toy in the window. Why do you want a toy now after being summoned to see the Hokage? We're already late as it is, the Anbu replied. Naruto dropped his head so that his bangs covered his eyes and in barely a whisper, it's for the Hokage's grandchild, he stated simply. He wants to get a gift for the honorable grandson? The Anbu looked back down to the blonde when he felt a tug on his sleeve. Naruto held up his frog purse to the Anbu. Would you? The blonde asked. The Anbu looked at the boy in shock. Just as he was about to speak, Naruto beat him to it. Not aloud, still using minimal words. I see. Sighing, the Anbu stood up and entered the shop with the frog purse in hand. After the Anbu returned with his frog purse and the stuffed animal, Naruto just stared in awe at the toy. It was almost like he hadn't had a toy before. The Anbu returned the frog purse to Naruto before slowly giving the toy to the child. Naruto lifted the stuffed animal to inspect it, turning it this way and that before nodding and clutching it tightly to his body. He smiled up at the Anbu in thanks, then moving off in the direction of the Hokage mansion with the Anbu trailing behind. Looking down at the blonde beside him, the Anbu decided he wasn't entirely happy with how the blonde was dressed in this seasonal weather. Said blonde was dressed in merely a t-shirt and shorts with a tattered old cloak which barely had any resistance to the wind. Sighing and with a shake of the head, the Anbu removed his black cloak and draped it around the boy beside him. The boy jumped when the cloak was draped around him. It was so big it practically dwarfed him, which was kinda cute with his blonde hair all tousled, his big round blue eyes staring lovingly at the toy he had purchased. And, tripping over the too long cloak hoops, the Anbu grimaced before stooping down to pick the blonde up from his place on the floor, placing the child at his hip and setting forth once more. The child was so surprised at this action that he was stiff as a board and his eyes were huge. It took quite a while for the child to realize what was actually happening. He was being carried. How was he meant to feel in this situation? Slowly he started to relax as the masked one's heartbeat lulled him into a sense of safety and security. Now that the Anbu had Naruto so close to him he could feel the difference in temperature. It was apparent the child was warmer in the cloak, but he frowned upon noticing that the child was so small and light. Naruto tapped the man's shoulder to draw his attention to him and pointed up towards the rooftops. The Anbu, getting the seldom speaking child's idea, leapt up onto the rooftops and maneuvering the child into a piggyback position started jumping across the buildings in typical ninja fashion. The wind rushing through his hair was calming. He wanted to go faster. Barely a whisper in the wind, but it was heard faster. Gathering Churka to his feet, the Anbu did as asked. It was like flying, the blonde decided. It was amazing, exhilarating, and he laughed in glee. The Anbu looked back when he heard the sound of laughter. Naruto was smiling and laughing as the wind whipped past him at an incredible pace. The kid barely even smiled, let alone laughed, but it was amazing. His smile was so bright, innocent and contagious. But when he laughed, you just wanted to join in with him. It was pure ecstasy watching the child enjoying himself, but with something as simple as a chakra-enhanced piggyback. There was the smallest of knocks on the office door, followed by a series of shuffling noises before the door opened to reveal the glowing figure of a young woman with long dark brown hair which stopped just below her shoulder blades and small, angry-looking black eyes. She was dressed in a long, loose-fitting yellow maternal dress with a simple gray blouse underneath. She looked down to see the blonde shuffling from foot to foot. She smiled and moved aside, allowing entry into the room. Hesitantly, Naruto crept forward into the room whilst Sayuri took a place on the sofa. Leaning over the sofa was a tall young man with short spiky brown hair, brown eyes and a brown bearded goatee, and slightly tanned skin, with a cigar held between his lips. He was wearing the standard black Konoha ninja uniform complete with open flak jacket, regular black shinobi sandals and a black forehead protector, and seated on the sofa with a bundle in his arms was the third, pipe noticeably absent. "Don't you think we should get you in something warmer?" the woman smiled. Looking up, the third spotted Naruto, who was still dressed in his shorts and t-shirt. She pulled herself up from the sofa and held out her hand to Naruto, who hesitated, glancing up to the third, who smiled kindly and nodded. Seeing this, Naruto shyly took the woman's hand. "Sayuri doesn't bite Naruto," the third laughed. The woman, now identified as Sayuri, bowed slightly to the Hokage and entered a room just off to the side of the office. Sayuri went over to a dresser to the right of the new room they were currently in and started rummaging about. Naruto, looking around the room, noticed a crib on the opposite wall to the dresser, a rocking chair in the corner with a bookcase next it. Above the dresser was a window looking out onto the village. The room was painted in a soft yellow color with green leaves painted on to create a border around the top of the wall. "Now then, Naruto, how about we try these on then?" Sayuri said, holding up a pair of gray trousers and a pale blue hooded top. She placed the items of clothing over her arm and kneeled down in front of Naruto to help him undress. "Arms up," she said. When Naruto didn't budge, she just sighed. "Naruto, I'm not going to hurt you, silly. Don't you remember me?" He paused for a moment before slowly shaking his head. Sayuri laughed and then promptly sat down. "Well then, let's try this again. My name's Sayuri Sarutobi, the Hokage's daughter-in-law. My husband, the man leaning of the sofa, is Ichiro Sarutobi III's eldest son. I'm a Chunin ranked ninja, while Ichiro is a Jonin." She paused to look at Naruto. "Here, I used to read you stories at night when you stayed with the third. I'd also donate clothes and toys to the orphanage. Is that better for you now, Naruto?" Naruto nodded at this and lifted his arms up so that she could lift his t-shirt up and replace it with the hoodie. Next, she helped him to step out of his shorts and pull up the trousers. Smiling, she stood up, neatly folded Naruto's clothes and held out her hand. "See, that wasn't so bad, was it?" Naruto shook his head again, and taking her outstretched hand, they proceeded back into the main room they had left moments ago. "Have you decided on a name yet?" The third asked. Ichiro embarrassedly placed his hand at the back of his neck and started to rub. "Well, actually, we were kinda hoping that you'd like to name him," he said in his rough, gravely baritone. The third, shocked, looked up from the bundle in his arms to first his son, then Sayuri, who had once again taken her place on the sofa. "Yes, old man, it would be an honor if you'd kindly name your grandson," she replied whilst leaning forwards to pick up Naruto, who tensed when he was lifted, and place him gently in her lap, running her hands soothingly through his hair. Well, thank you. What should I call you then, little one?" he said, gazing down at his grandson. How about Yamato? No, that doesn't sound right. He gazed out the window over the village of Konoha then gently said Konohamaru, that's a wonderful name old man, don't you think Ichi? Sayuri sighed still running her hands through Naruto's hair whilst gazing lovingly up at Ichiro. Yeah it is he replied watching his wife. Naruto who had finally settled in Sayuri's lap tugged on her sleeve to gain her attention, when she turned to look at Naruto. He held up the cuddly toy and pointed to Konohamaru, smiling Sayuri suggested he give it to Konohamaru himself. Carefully he removed himself from the lady's lap and crawled over to the third. He kneeled higher on the sofa and finally gazed at the bundle of blankets. There was a mess of brown hair atop the small round face slightly tanned face with small, angry-looking black eyes that were staring intently up at him. He had an intense look on his face which instantly brightened when Naruto moved the cuddly toy into view. The baby smiled and cooed at the toy which was then placed very gently into the bundle of blankets with the baby. That was very nice of you Naruto to buy a gift like that the third said but why that toy? He said pointing to the little floppy-eared brown dog now wrapped in the blankets. Not a monkey came Naruto's small shy reply. The men of the Sarutobi family proceeded to laugh at this noticing how the 4-year-old didn't want to stereotype by giving the newest Sarutobi a monkey. You know we got you a gift too Naruto Sayuri stated whilst indicating that Ichiro should go collect it. Moving away from the sofa Ichiro moved into the room where Naruto had changed and proceeded to come out with a neatly wrapped present. It was orange with a blue bow on top. It instantly caught Naruto's attention. However he wasn't too sure what to do when he was presented with it. You rip open the wrapping to see what's inside Ichiro explained. Naruto looked between the third and Sayuri before carefully unwrapping the present to reveal a set of pencils and a sketchpad. Dad said you were quite creative so we thought we'd give you an outlet for it Ichiro stated before showing Naruto how get started with his new gift. Sayuri gazed contentedly at her family. Would you like to hold him Naruto? It's easy enough and I know you won't drop him Sayuri asked. Sitting back Naruto was shown the correct way to hold the baby by Sayuri and the third carefully placed his new grandson into Naruto's arms. Naruto glanced at Sayuri then at Ichiro and finally at the third all were smiling at him and the baby in his arms. There was the sound of a shutter closing and a soft cough that caught the attention of everyone in the room. The Anbu that had collected Naruto earlier walked over and presented the third with the photograph he had just taken whilst ruffling Naruto's hair and removing the orange book which had suddenly appeared in Naruto's lap before fading back into background. Chapter 3 Blue eyes gleaming in the corner of the room. All that can be seen in the darkness slinking ever so quietly to the cot in the middle of the room jumping up onto its railings, the blue eyes peered down onto the sleeping newborn. It was a strange sight looking down at this newborn, the slow rising of its chest, the shallow sounds of its breathing, the serene look upon its wrinkled little face. The blue eyes walked delicately along the railing. How easy it would be to simply just end it with a swipe of my claws but no, that wouldn't be fair. Especially not to the mistress. Eyes turning towards the futon located in the room the shadow gracefully climbed down the railings and landing with a soft poof, padded across the room to the futon and nimbly jumped onto the duvet. And now this one again he's come into my territory the strange little child with blonde hair and whisker-like markings on his face a small sniff. Smells strangely, almost demon-like. Blue's eyes widening. This is the demon. Humphrey stuck in a little child how amusing. Turning smoothly away dropping from the futon with a small thump the shadow slunk gracefully towards the open doorway into the next room gazing steadily about the room before leaping up onto the bed. Elegantly moving from the end of the bed to the middle noticing two occupants in the bed the shadow proceeded towards the left side where the female of the two laid. The shadow moved in a circle before laying down and closing its eyes. A patch of moonlight landed on the shadow to reveal a small blonde feline. Orange stripes patterned the blonde with a splash of white on the tip of its tail. The female moved her hand so that she was absently stroking the cat, enjoying the sensation. The cat curled onto its back to reveal a little white underbelly allowing the human to stroke its belly. Line. Two Anbus stood either side of a doorway minding their time to the end of their shift. They were currently surveying the hallway which consisted of nothing. Not one person had entered this particular hallway which made for a rather easy and boring job for the two Anbus. One Anbu was wearing a turtle mask while the other was in a cat mask. Both were wearing the typical Anbu attire. A shift in chakra pulled the attention of both Anbu before the shift disappeared. Cautiously the cat Anbu moved so that he was further down the corridor. Glancing around he saw nothing till he looked at the plant. He noticed a second shadowed shape hidden beside it. That's the cloak of invisibility technique. It's small, and it's about time my shift ended so that could only mean. A shift in chakra the other end of the corridor pulled their attention to that direction. How'd he manage to do that? Moving back towards the doorway cat positioned himself to one side of the doorway, hand prepared to pull out a kunai at a moment's notice. Da-dum. The only sound in the corridor but where was it coming from? The two Anbu stationed outside the door looked at each other in puzzlement. Da-dum. The sound appeared to be moving closer, but where was it coming from? He's stalking us. The two Anbu looked left and right until da-dum. With a flourish, the cat mask that had been adhering the young Anbu's face was now moving at a frightening speed down the corridor. In complete shock, both Anbus watched as the yellow blur sped around the corner. Just as his Anbu partner was about to look at his unconcealed face, Cat ran after the yellow blur he instantly recognized that was giggling with glee. Line. Rar. Narutowhatif. I'm gonna need my mask back. Naruto, wearing orange shorts and white t-shirt holding the cat mask, he had stolen off his favorite Anbu, on his face using both hands while running and making roaring noises and being chased by a mask-class Anbu was having a great time. Cat was his favorite Anbu because he took the time to get to know him and play with him. He played all sorts of games, but hide-and-seek was his favorite. Running into the Hokage's office while still being chased by Cat, Naruto unknowingly disrupted an important meeting with the higher-ranking Anbu ninja of the village. Naruto stopped suddenly mid-stride, moved the mask to the side of his head and turned to the Hokage and bowed in an apologetic manner. With mirth in his eyes, the Hokage chuckled, "How did you get your hands on that then?" Holding his hand out waiting for the mask to be placed in his hand. With disappointment evident in his body, he reluctantly took the mask off of its slanted position on his head and placed it into the Hokage's extended hand. Once the mask touched the Hokage's hand, he threw it to the empty space just to the left of the crowd of ninja where it was caught and placed onto the face of the Anbu who was forming in front of him. "Try not to lose that, Cat," the Hokage reprimanded. Naruto, who was facing the Hokage with eyes closed so as not to see the Anbu's face, turned and opened his eyes to see the imposing figure of Ibiki Morino staring down at him. Ibiki Morino was a big bear of a man with a broad frame and scars covering his face. To most children he was the scary man, any child's nightmare. Naruto however cocked his head to one side whilst looking up at the man and smiled. "Bear," Naruto said. "Excuse me," Ibiki questioned. "Bear?" Naruto repeated cautiously. Bending down to the child's level, Ibiki stared at the strange child before him. "Why are you not afraid of me?" "Why should I be?" "Because of your scars? Scars are a measure of your endurance and testament to your skill and to your will of fire, knowing that you will give your life for the village and your Hokage. Besides, scars are just damaged tissue, and the worst ones aren't the ones that you can see, in here." He holds a hand to his chest and here he pointed to his head. "Besides, you should never judge a book by its cover." "Bear?" Ibiki questioned. "You're kinda like a bear, all big and grrr," Naruto replied while making gestures with his hands. For big, he raised his hands above his head, and for grrr dropping his hands to his head and making clawing motions. Again Ibiki raised his eyebrow at the little blonde boy in front of him. "Well, you're big and all imposing like a bear is big, and the scars give off an ominous impression kinda like a bear, and you're gruff and burly and have a long coat like a bear, and it's kinda the first thing that popped into my head when I saw you." Naruto, realizing what Ibiki had done, paused for a short moment then spoke. "You're good, by the way. Do you reckon they'll be awake now?" Naruto said, turning to where he knew Cat was standing. "Who?" Ibiki replies. "The Sarutobis. Not everyone's awake at 5 in the morning, you know, especially if you've just got in from a mission at 2 in the morning. Come on, little one, let's get you somewhere where you're not causing a disturbance." Cat's husky voice sounded as he bent and picked Naruto up and carried him out of the room, stopping briefly to bow to his superiors and the Hokage. "That's the most I've ever heard Naruto say. And to speak to you, Ibiki, of all people, that's astounding." The shocked Hokage muttered. Line. Naruto hated his long shaggy blonde hair. Hated how the old man's eyes would flick up to a picture in his office when he saw Naruto. Hated how people would comment on his blonde coloring. How ninja would stop and think about something then change their mind whenever they saw him or stop and do a double take. He knew why this was. The fourth. It was his fault. He had the same long shaggy blonde hair as Naruto. He died the night Naruto was born. He knew he needed a haircut so that people would stop seeing the fourth when they looked at him. Naruto was rather bright as he walked around the shopping district, wearing orange shorts and white t-shirt with a red spiral on the center and blue sandals. Of course he didn't mind much, it would help discover his prey or them discover him hopefully. The subtle scent of dog reached Naruto's nose before he spotted the wild spiky brown hair of his prey. Slowly Naruto approached, being cautious to approach away from the wind so his scent wasn't detected. Good practice for ninja training, as he didn't favor confronting the dogs. Of course Naruto is only 5, so naturally someone noticed him as he was picked up by the scruff of his shirt and lifted into the air to come to the attention Tsume Inuzuka. Staring down at the messy mop of blonde hair, Tsume was intrigued that Kuromaru had brought him to her. "Please, Inuzuka-san, I'm sorry to have disrupted you, but I was wondering if it would be possible for you to please cut my hair?" Naruto asked nervously while being growled at by the 3 Heimaru brothers. He'd obviously interrupted the walk to the academy as both Tsume's children were present. Tsume looked at Naruto inquisitively. "Well, I just wondered cause you must groom your what are they called not dogs," said. Animals growled at him familiarly, "so I thought you might be able to show me how I could do it, cause I'm not sure that the barbers would allow me," and Naruto trailed off. "Familiars you mean," Kuromaru corrected, taking pity on Naruto. "Fine pup, but I got errands I need to run first." She indicated her head at her daughter. That wasn't an experience that Naruto wanted to repeat too soon. The Inuzuka compound scared him far too much to warrant another visit there. Tsume Inuzuka wasn't what scared him, the dogs however did. Animals just didn't like him. Hopefully he wouldn't need a haircut again for a while. Naruto, wearing orange shorts and white t-shirt, had got his haircut. Well, he got it all sheared off so it was no longer in his eyes and he wasn't all hot and stuffy and all messy all the time. Besides, nearly everyone recognized his blonde locks, so by default with those locks no longer there he shouldn't be as recognizable, technically speaking that is. Naruto looked over his shoulder as he walked down the road to see a small blonde cat, with orange stripes and a splash of white on the tip of its tail and stomach. Naruto quickened his pace, moving effortlessly from the amassing crowds. Glancing back, he made out the white-tipped blonde tail bobbing through the crowds. Naruto was beginning to panic. Animals in general hated Naruto almost as much as the villagers did. He often found that cats would hiss and claw at him while dogs would growl and raise their hackles. So in general he tried to steer clear of animals even if he just wanted to pet them only the once, which is why Naruto panicked when he realized that he was being followed by a cat. Naruto's quickened pace turned into a run as he tried to outmaneuver the following feline. Naruto glanced back once again as he turned into a dead end to find no sign of the blonde cat. Turning round in glee to face the dead end, he saw the blonde cat stood atop the fencing where it leapt down, knocking Naruto quivering in fear to the floor. Meow. From the entrance of the alleyway a masked figure approached the extremely frightened child cowering on the floor with a small cat leering over him. "Hey little one, what's wrong?" asked the cat masked Anbu. Looking up with tear-filled eyes, Naruto jumped up into Cat's arm where he trembled and sniffled and cried. Shocked but catching the blonde figure carefully, Cat instantly started rubbing circles on his young charge's back, trying to soothe him. Looking up from the quivering bundle in his arms to see Sayuri's cat staring at him, blue eyes inquisitive, with its head cocked to one side, eerily similar to how Naruto does. "Naruto, why are you afraid of Lady Sarutobi's cat?" Cat inquired. Wet mumbles against his chest were incoherent even to his well-trained ears. "You're gonna have to speak clearly, little one. I can't understand your tearful talk," he said, whilst Naruto was wiping the back of his hand across his nose. "Mom has a cat?" Naruto sniffled into Cat's shoulder. "Yeah, she does." Cat nodded. "Now are you going to tell me why you're scared of it?" Naruto dipped back a little so he could see Cat properly. "Animals in general hate me almost as much as the villagers do. Cats hiss and claw at me while dogs growl and raise their hackles. It's kinda scary. I'd understand if I'd done something, but I don't think I have." How strange the little child thinks animals hate him when we're just reacting to the demon we sense inside him. Maybe he doesn't know about the thing inside him. Corking her head to the side a little, he said, "The villagers hate him, then no wonder he's scared. He thinks we'll do what the villagers do, and I'd be quite willing to do just that with a swipe of my claws." The cat's eyes narrowed. "Damn stupid villagers." Stretching languidly, the cat straightened before swiftly moving towards the kneeling duo, and upon reaching them started weaving along Naruto's legs, rubbing against him. Moving round to the child's front, the cat climbed up into his lap, purring contentedly when Naruto, after a quick glance at Cat, hesitantly started to rub the cat's head, who closed her eyes in contentment. "See, not so bad now, is it?" Cat asked. Naruto shook his head while still rubbing the cat's head. Smirking behind his mask, Cat removed himself from Naruto and his newfound feline friend. Cat glanced cautiously out the alleyway, remembering what Naruto had said about the villagers. Noticing a few presences either side of the entrance, he casually raised his chakra level, which caused both Naruto and the cat to twitch momentarily, before lowering it again when the presences had retreated away from the alley. "Now how am I going to explain to your mother about your hair?" Cat stated as he ran his hand through Naruto's non-existent hair. "No bath. No bath," Naruto shouted as he ran gleefully through the corridors of the Hokage Tower. The ninja meeting in the Hokage's office could hear the entire commotion. How does he still have all this energy? The third thought whilst rubbing his forehead tiredly. And who forgot to shut the door? Damn ninjas. The ninjas in the room mostly contained disgruntled expressions upon hearing the voice of their heir, which soon turned to complete shock upon hearing the next sentence. "Naruto Uzumaki Sarutobi." Naruto stopped running just outside the office doorway, turning with eyes wide and face completely shocked to face the annoyed expression on Sayuri Sarutobi's face, marching up to Naruto, face red and stomps landing heavily on the wooden floor. "That made you stop, I see. Next time maybe I'll add your middle name." "Huh, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" she said, anger quickly dissolving into confusion. "You called me Sarutobi?" Naruto questioned in his quiet gravelly voice. It made you stop running, didn't it? But I'm not a Sarutobi. Are you not the Hokage's grandson? Yeah, but I'm not a real Sarutobi, he whispered. Oh Naruto, she said, kneeling in front of him, you may not be a Sarutobi by blood, but we treat you like family. That's why the old man will never let you go without receiving a hug. Why I tuck you in at night, read you stories, help you when you're confused or hurt. Family isn't just about blood and who you're related to. It's about people you trust and care for, and they become your precious people. Precious people? He questioned, tilting his head to the side in a cat-like fashion. People who you trust and care for, they're the ones who become your precious people, the ones you're willing to give everything for. Taking a breath, she continues, you may not understand it yet, but you will one day, and that's why you'll make such a great big brother to Konohamaru, she said, embracing him in a hug. The ninja in the Hokage's office were stunned. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The demon child was partially covered in mud with twigs and leaves sticking out all over his hair. And there was Lady Sarutobi willing, talking and caring for this monster, and what she was saying really started to cause them to think. Granted, you don't have Sarutobi in your name at all, but you're a speedy little one and I want you bathed and in bed by 8 o'clock. How else am I going to catch you? Besides, you've got a long journey ahead of you tomorrow, she said knowingly. The ninjas in the office face planted. No bath, Naruto said stubbornly. Why, what's wrong with baths? It's all bubbles and toys and little rubber duckies, she questioned, making little squeezing motions with her hands when talking about rubber ducks. Naruto had a blank expression on his face. Suddenly the Hokage's daughter-in-law got a dark look on her face. I don't want to know how they washed you at the orphanage. She took a deep breath. But no son of mine is going to stay all dirty and grubby because some incompetent fool can't see the little boy you are. I would never hurt you, Naruto, you know that. Trust me when I say you'll enjoy a bath. It's lots of fun. Okay, Naruto meekly replied and took Sayuri's proffered hand, and together walked back the way they had come to enjoy bath time. Chapter 4. Walking through the foliage of the ancient trees located almost solely in the Land of Fire was the Hokage, his escorting ninjas and their young charge who was accompanying them all on this long journey. The patterns of leaves where the light fell across the canopy scattered green hues shaped like leaves and shadows across the party. The group of 5 ninja were walking in blissful peace loosely surrounding the Hokage. The Hokage, dressed in the ceremonial Hokage robes that he usually wore along with the traditional hat, was puffing serenely away on his pipe whilst holding the hand of his young charge. Naruto, with his new hairstyle, sheared hair, was wearing a blue top and black trousers with brown boots and an orange scarf, his eyes darting everywhere in curiosity. Naruto was full of excitement. He'd never been outside of the city gates before, and now here he was with his favorite person ever in the Hokage, his sort of grandfather. One of the hooded Anbu that was chaperoning the Hokage and Naruto moved closer to the walking pair as the Hokage looked sternly down at Naruto, still not happy that the child had his distinguishable blonde locks cut off, leaving him with a considerable length of hair left on top, with the sides cut a lot closer to his head, almost like a faux hawk but not styled. The Anbu nudged Naruto a little while inclining with his head towards the Hokage. Naruto glanced up at the hooded Anbu and spotted the familiar cat mask. Nodding, he took a brief breath and glanced at the Hokage. Hokage-sama, what sort of trees are these? Naruto said as the group accompanying the Hokage walked down the forest path leading away from Koona. And are they like the ones in Koona? How old are they? Do they reach all the way to the Fire Daimyo's palace? Take a breath, Naruto, the Hokage chuckled. I've never seen you so full of excitement. I've never left the village before, Naruto stated. Oh, of course. He took a puff from his pipe. What was your first question again? Oh, these are trees created by the first Hokage using his wood release technique, and they lead quite close to the Daimyo's palace and mainly found in Koona. It would have been nearly 100 years since he made them, but I don't know how old they are. What's the palace like? You'll see, Naruto. You want a tree jump? Naruto cat asked. Seeing the smile light up Naruto's face, he bent down, allowing Naruto to climb on his back. Making sure he was safely on his back, he leapt up into the trees, keeping pace with the ninja that had remained on the path. I've got to remember to give Cat more time off. He does wonders with Naruto, the Hokage thought before signaling the rest of the ninjas into the trees. Well, it will make the journey take less time. Line. The town of Hinomaki was surrounded by a vast wall of white stone which eventually joined the daimyo's palace walls. Aligning the road leading towards the palace where the bustling villagers were wandering between the street vendors. Crossing a bridge overlooking the river meandering through the town, Naruto at last caught sight of the palace. The palace was majestic, made from the same white stone as the guarding walls of the town with dark green roof tiles. It was easily twice the length of the Hokage Tower, with huge grounds, an amazing garden with ponds and rivers flowing throughout the grounds, with sakura trees blowing in the warm wind. With pink blossoms dancing around the group, they proceeded through the gates of the palace. Line. Ah, Hokage-sama, a pleasure to see you again, the Fire Daimyo said as he greeted his guests into his palace. The daimyo was accompanied by 2 people who Naruto assumed were taking on the roles of the Hokage's Anbu. One with a bald head and black eyebrows wearing robes belonging to the Fire Temple monks, with a sash tied around his waist. The other had brown eyes and longish black hair and wore a simple long-sleeve shirt with bandages on the arms, pants, the same sash as the other guard and a jacket with a fur collar. He reminded Naruto slightly of his dad. Then looking between the old man and the guard before him he realized there was a connection of some sort. Turning to Kat he signed, "Kat, who are they and what's that sash around their waist?" The sash around their waist shows that they are a part of the 12 guardians who guard the Daimyo. Kat replied, "I am Kairiku, a ninja monk. My friend here is Asuma Sarutobi from your village." The monk signed, shocking Naruto. Naruto looked to Kat then inclined his head to the old man and Asuma. "Yes, the Hokage's son Asuma, your dad's little brother." Kat signed. Naruto's mouth formed into an O shape before turning and rummaging through the bag his mother helped him pack. Finding what he wanted, Naruto padded over to Asuma, tugged on his pant leg to get attention. When the young man did look down at him he proudly presented the gift to him. Taking the gift in shock, Asuma inquired about the gift. "Mom said that I was to give this to Uncle Suma. She hopes you like it." Naruto then bowed to Asuma. Line. The Hokage and Naruto were walking through the palace grounds when they came across a group of children playing. They were dressed rather similarly. They each wore a style of gray robe with white trousers underneath if they were a boy, or gray and white dress type robes if they were girls. There was one child with shoulder-length bluish hair, who wore a similar outfit to Kairiku, the ninja monk Naruto had met earlier. The children were playing with a ball, trying to get the ball into one of two goals. Naruto watched as a child kicked the ball towards the goal closest to the guarding wall and missed by a wide berth, causing the ball to ricochet after the wall and bounce towards where the boy wearing monk clothes was standing. Naruto, who had stopped to watch the child, looked back up at the Hokage as he was pushed towards the playing children. "Ask them if you can play with them. Go on. I've got to attend this meeting, but Kat will be nearby, don't worry," the Hokage said, patting Naruto gently on the shoulder, turning and walking in the direction they had just come from. Naruto turned his attention back to the children at play, taking a deep breath and stepping out into the courtyard where the children were playing. Naruto slowly made his way over to the children until he was stood at the edge of their game. The children looked up from their game when they realized someone was standing on the edge of their game. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head when all the children stared at him. "Hey," he waved, "can I join you in your game please?" he asked gingerly. "Who are you?" one of the girls asked. "Naruto Uzumaki, from Konoha. The Hokage brought me with him." He smiled. "Have you ever played before?" an older child inquired. "No. The other kids don't tend to let me." "Then what makes you think we'll let you, freak?" He walked off with the other children following his example. Naruto's face fell. He thought for once he'd be able to be normal, have friends and play like all children do, but even far from Konoha the jeers of his peers still continues. Moving back away from the jeering kids, Naruto moved towards the bushes and trees that were lining the edge of the garden he was in. Now hidden in the bushes he watched as a young girl approached the children. She was wearing an elegant purple dress with a pale green sash tied around her waist. Her black hair was tied into an extricate bun on top of her head, her purple eyes hidden behind her bangs. She approached the same boy that had turned Naruto down. Taking a deep breath she tapped him on the shoulder. "Can I play with you guys?" she asked boldly. Turning around the elder child proclaimed, "But you're a little princess and princesses don't play. Go on, run along to your lessons, princess," he sneered snobbishly, motioning for the other children to move on and continue elsewhere. The little princess turned on her heel and stormed away into the building. Naruto had watched the whole thing intently and decided that he was better off following the little princess. He moved away from his hiding place and moved quickly back into the palace. He moved down the hallway in the direction the girl had run. Finally Naruto came across a room where the little girl was. She was in a sort of playroom. Naruto had seen the one his parents had started to prepare for Konohamaru and him to use. This room, however, was finished and full to bursting with things for her to play with. There were games piled up neatly in the corner, bookcases lining the walls, paint pots, crayons and clay in one corner, and in the center of the room was the young girl Naruto was looking for. She had a big pink pony cuddly toy that was squeezed tightly in her arms. "Are you okay?" Naruto tentatively asked. Shocked, the little girl spun around, toy still clutched tightly in her hands. "Who are you? What do you want?" she sniveled in anger. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki and I wanted to see if you were okay," he hesitantly replied. "What are you talking about, little princess?" he questioned. The girl's face turned stony as she jumped up, an expression of anger on her face, dropped the toy and exclaimed, "I'm not a little princess. I'm Kimiko Shijime, the Fire Lord's daughter." "Sorry. Would you like to play together?" "Why would I want to play with you? Go find some other commoner to play with." Sighing, Naruto shook his head. "Little princess is used to make you feel isolated and alone. The children call you that because they are intimidated by your power and status. They don't like the fact that you're a girl who will one day rule the country, but girls can be incredible people, You just have to be willing to push past it, Naruto said as he turned and left the room. Line. The Hokage was seated at one end of the table while the Daimyo was seated at the other with the respected personnel surrounding the edge of the room. The Hokage started to stuff his pipe while he waited for the Daimyo to start the meeting. Lighting his pipe, his eyes wandered over to the fire guardian station behind the Daimyo. He noticed Asuma. He really needed to sort things out with him. As soon as this meeting is over, the Hokage decided. Line. The third approached Asuma just as he was entering the guardian quarters. Asuma? The Hokage called, hoping that his son would grace him with his presence. Sighing and placing a cigarette between his lips, Asuma turned to face his father. Why did you bring Naruto with you, old man? Asuma replied absently, lighting his cigarette with his silver Zippo lighter. Ichiro and Sayuri took him in, and I thought it would be better if he were with me for a while so they don't have to worry about him while they care for their baby. Worry about him? Why would they worry about him? Why'd they have him anyway? He turned his head away and exhaled a puff of smoke. Naruto hasn't had a very nice life, Asuma-san. Naruto was placed in an orphanage and that wasn't a very pleasant experience for him. They kept him until he was 3, then chucked him out. He was living on the streets with occasional visits to me before Lady Sarutobi found and took him under her wing. He's still careful about what he calls us. Sayuri tries very hard to give Naruto a normal life and to allow him to call us by family terms, hence why your Uncle Suma. So he's a Sarutobi now? No, he's still Uzumaki, but he's welcomed into our family circle. You know, it took me weeks to get Naruto to talk to me, and yet he spoke to you practically straight away. Why didn't he talk to me straight away? The Hokage thought sadly. Line. As the two important figureheads continued their discussion, the door situated behind the Hokage opened and closed, allowing enough space for a small figure to walk into the room and, unnoticed by all in the room, make their way silently over to where the two figures were seated. Gazing up briefly at the figure closest, the small figure clambered up the chair and into the Hokage's lap, where he proceeded to, in a very cat-like manner, curl up and steadily fall asleep. The Hokage in surprise looked down at his lap to see a napping Naruto sprawled on his side whilst still curled head facing up, much like Nami tends to do when dreaming. A small smile appears on the Hokage's face as he lovingly runs his hand across Naruto's non-existent hair. Line. Asuma and Kairiku had wandered into the palace gardens where the children were playing. Looking around, they noticed that both the daimyo's daughter and Naruto were not playing with the other children. Scanning the garden, they couldn't find neither hide nor hair of the two children. Moving through the garden, the two guardians scanned the area hoping to find a glimpse of the two errant children. It wasn't until Asuma was stood under one of the trees that lined the edge of the grounds that he spotted a foot dangling a few inches above his head. Following the sandaled foot upwards, he found a set of orange shorts which led into a black t-shirt which led to the blonde-haired Naruto. Naruto sat on the branch with one foot dangling down while the other propped up his sketchbook, leaning back against the trunk of the tree. "She's not out here," Naruto said as he continued his sketch while directing his question at Kairiku, who had just moved up next to Asuma. "Well, where is she then?" Asuma asked. Naruto pointed back towards the house with his free hand while continuing to draw in his sketchbook. "May I ask why both of you aren't playing with the other children?" Kairiku inquired. Naruto moved so that his sketch pad couldn't be seen by Asuma's prowling eyes. "It's harder when you're a child of someone powerful or wealthy. People tend to have an opinion of you. And people like me tend to have a harder time in general," he said as he closed his sketchbook and flipped out of the tree, landing perfectly in a crouched position. "So what are you two doing?" Naruto nosily sighed. "We were just on our way to train. Perhaps you'd like to join us?" Kairiku inquired. "Can I? Really?" Naruto sounded so unsure that it threw both guardians for a loop. "Of course," Kairiku replied. "Sure, why not? Just don't hurt yourself, okay?" Asuma stated as he lit up a cigarette, causing Naruto's nose to wrinkle when the smell hit his sensitive nose. "It's gotta be a Sarutobi thing, that smoking business," Naruto concluded. "Grandpa's got a pipe, Dad's got cigars, and Asuma has cigarettes." Naruto muttered whilst Kairiku chuckled and Asuma grumbled. Finally the trio came across a nice open space where they could begin training. Naruto settled down on the edge of the area with sketchbook in hand, and the two guardians began their practice, first by stretching and relaxing their muscles before moving into the stances and commencing battle. Naruto's attention flickered between the two fighting guardians and his sketchbook. It was interesting watching them train, and even more interesting when he noticed Kairiku's stances. They weren't like anything he'd remembered seeing before in the books of Konoha. He assumed they were the fighting styles of the monks, as that's what Kairiku said he was. The style seemed to rely on aggression, seemingly linear movements, and explosive power. So Kairiku uses coordinated movement to generate bursts of power intended to overwhelm the opponent, simultaneously attacking and defending. Interesting. While Uncle Asuma uses trench knives in his stance from Konoha, Uncle Suma uses his trench knives for extra reach. And is that blue? Naruto thought. He studied Asuma's knives a bit more. He could just faintly see the blue outline added to them. How's that happening? It's chakra, I'm sure. I wonder how he's doing that. Naruto wondered. Kairiku noticed Naruto had stopped sketching and was staring intently at Asuma's knives. He moved to end the session by putting distance between them and bowing. Walking over to Naruto, the two men sat either side of the boy. With his attention twisting between the two, Naruto didn't know who to ask first. Asuma lit up another cigarette as he slouched with his hands behind him supporting his body. Casting an eye over to the young blonde, he noticed the fixation on his chakra knives. Breathing out a puff of smoke, he moved one onto his hand and showed it to Naruto, whose inquisitive nature showed in his face. This is my chakra-enhanced trench knife. They are made from a chakra-enhancing metal. When infused with wind-natured chakra through chakra flow, it can easily pierce through stone. The thing is, people can often misjudge the distance they need to avoid them, as the added chakra lengthens the blade, causing them to be cut even though it appears they've dodged the attack. He explained, demonstrating what he meant by pushing chakra through the knife. Naruto's eyes widened in awe while viewing the knife and listening to the explanation, and nodded to show he understood, turning his wide eyes towards Kairiku, waiting for him to explain what he was doing. The style I used appears to rely on aggression, seemingly linear movements and explosive power. Using coordinated movements to generate bursts of power intended to overwhelm the opponent, simultaneously attacking and defending. It is one of the styles of the ninja monks. Although I don't like this style very much, I still need to practice. I prefer the style that relies on dodging and countering your opponent's attacks. Would you like to learn some of this second style? Nodding eagerly, Naruto jumped up and began to go through a few minor stretching exercises. When fully stretched, he stood intently in front of Kairiku awaiting instruction. Asuma still sat on the side, chuckled as Naruto was shown through the beginning stances of the ninja monk's traditional taijutsu when he noticed Naruto's sketchpad. Slyly he moved so that he was able to see the sketchpad better, and just as he was reaching out to turn the page, Naruto landed on the sketchpad, effectively closing the book and stopping Asuma from seeing the contents. Naruto finally moved away from his sketchpad after staring down Asuma, making sure he wasn't going to look again before continuing through the stances with Kairiku. It was almost dark when Naruto managed to fall asleep on his feet. Kairiku called Asuma over and smiled at the young blonde. Asuma picked Naruto up in his arms, cradling him, shifting him into a comfortable position and making sure Kairiku had gathered the boy's sketchpad. They made their way back into the building. I've never seen someone learn so fast, Asuma. It's incredible. The way he easily understood what I was explaining. No 4-year-old should understand the concept of chakra manipulation yet. He's a special kid. He's had a rough life so far from what I've been told, and it's rare for him to open up like that. He's always reading or sketching, as we saw. Besides, Kakashi Hatake graduated from the academy at age 5, so it is entirely possible that he's read the theory behind things and it then makes sense when that theory is then performed. Perhaps he's like a typical Konoha genius. We get one once a generation. He's going to be an interesting addition to my family, that's for certain. Best get him back to dad now, though he completely tired himself out with that training. Indeed, Kairiku summarized. Uncle Suma, why'd you become a guardian? Naruto asked as he, Asuma and Kairiku made their way into the daimyo's grounds. They'd been practicing and showing Naruto the basic steps that the monks at the ninja temple would go through. Because I wanted to help the daimyo rather than serving the king, Asuma sighed. The king? Naruto questioned the two men in front of him, quirking his head to the side. He's talking about shogi pieces. It's one of the last conversations that Asuma had with his father, Kairiku stated. In shogi, the most important piece is the king, and you can't have two kings. But surely the king isn't either the daimyo or the Hokage. Isn't it the children who'll grow up to bear Konoha upon their shoulders? Naruto said as he stepped into the guardian quarters ahead of the two guardians, who looked to each other in wonderment at the wisdom of such a small child. Jumping on Naruto's bed, Asuma woke the sleeping boy by throwing the sleepy blonde high into the air. Of course, Asuma hadn't expected Naruto to cling to the ceiling like a spooked cat, eyes wide and skin pale, taking heaving breaths. Running his hand along the back of his head, Asuma sheepishly apologized while calmly talking Naruto down. Finally calming Naruto down and coaxing him into a clean set of clothing, Asuma explained why he had come unannounced into the blonde's room. It has come to my attention that you, Naruto, cannot swim, therefore as your uncle it is my duty to teach you to swim. Cat here will also accompany us, Asuma said as he helped Naruto get dressed. But cats can't swim. Naruto replied, pulling his t-shirt over his head. Both adults turned to each other and laughed. Cat turned to Naruto. Naruto, cats don't like water, but they can swim. Cat assured while running his hand across Naruto's hair. Why is it so important that I learn to swim anyway? Don't ninja just walk on water? Naruto replied, pulling on his last sandal and jumping off the railings and running after the two walking adults. Cat looked at Asuma before turning round and facing Naruto, who had finally caught up to the two walking adults. Ninja can walk on water, yes, but if your client falls in the water hurt or can't swim, then it's your job to dive in and get them, understand? Cat said looking down at the little blonde holding his hand. Nodding his head, Naruto inquired where they were headed to. Arriving at a bridge crossing a river, Asuma moved towards the left-hand river bank while Cat jumped up on the railings before jumping up into a tree on the right-hand river bank. Naruto, follow me please. Right, firstly, Cat's not going into the water, he's just keeping an eye out. He's my bodyguard, Naruto stated. Something like that, yeah. Asuma said, running his hand along the back of his head. Anyway, there's 3 sorts of styles to swimming. Right, Naruto nodded. Okay, so there's the breaststroke. Asuma sees Naruto's blank look and turned to Cat. Naruto looked at Cat sat up in the tree that stood on the opposite river bank. Like a frog. Oh, froggies. Froggies swim like this. Naruto moved his arms in front of his chest with the back of his hands touching, palms facing outwards, then pushed his arms forward and then cupping his hands and pulling them back. Asuma worked an eyebrow in question. He pretends to be a frog in the bathtub now. Now? He didn't like water much, Cat replied, turning back to the blonde. Asuma moved on to the next explanation. Okay, then the front crawl. Waiting to see if Naruto was going to show him what a front crawl was, when nothing was forthcoming he continued. Okay then, so a front crawl is where the arm is making a spearing motion arching into the water, then pulling back out of the water, preferably with the elbow exiting first. He demonstrated what he described, then went on to describe how he should be kicking while moving his arms. After making sure Naruto understood by demonstrating what had just been explained, he moved on to the final way of swimming. Okay, the final style is the backstroke. This involves lying on your back in the water, then moving first one arm in a backwards windmill motion followed by the other. You must kick using your full leg. Does that make sense? He said, turning to Cat still sat in the tree. Shrugging, Cat stated, you've got to get him in the water yet though. Taking his fur-lined jacket off followed by his shirt and sandals, Asuma moved towards the river before changing his mind and heading towards the bridge. Jumping up onto the railings, he glanced at Naruto before diving into the water. Rising to the surface of the river, Asuma ran his hands up over his head and looked up at Naruto, who had taken both his shirt and sandals off and was crouched on the railings looking down at Asuma. Are you coming in? Asuma waved out across the water. Naruto shook his head from side to side. You sure? It'll be fun. Besides, I need to know that you can perform those strokes. Naruto still shook his head. Asuma splashed the water, enticing the boy in. Thankfully the river didn't have a very strong current, but if he didn't know what he was doing, Naruto could possibly drift away. Naruto shook his head, stood up, stretched and was promptly splashed by Asuma, shaking the excess water from his body. Naruto looked down at Asuma to see him smirking up at him. We won't let anything happen to you if that's what you're worried about. Naruto nodded, then moving in the exact way Asuma had, dived into the water and splashed Asuma with his entrance into the water. Naruto erupted from the water and proceeded to perform the backstroke, before turning and performing the breaststroke, diving back under the water. Then he began swimming like a frog under the water. Then popping up in front of Asuma, he spat the water in his mouth out, soaking the elder of the pair. The shock on Asuma's face quickly changed to exuberance, followed by a splash to Naruto's face, which quickly turned into a splash roar. Cat sat up in the tree, shook his head in amusement. Asuma was really bringing Naruto out of his shell. It was nice seeing the bundle of energy that he was. He continued to watch the two frolicking in the water. Line. Giggling with glee, a yellow blur ran across the bankside, followed by a rather wet-looking Asuma Sarutobi. Naruto was quite the slippery one. He was small and easily got out of the guardian's hold. They'd run across both banks several times now. Asuma dived for Naruto and on making contact wrapped his arms around the boy, rolling over and splashing into the river where they'd been swimming earlier. Coming up for air, the pair were laughing, enjoying each other's company. Asuma ran his hands up over his head through his hair, causing it to stick up. You look better with your hair like that, Naruto pointed at Asuma, whose hair was spiked up in the typical Sarutobi style. Naruto splashed Asuma one last time before exiting the river and pulling himself up onto the bank side, where he shook himself dry like a cat and was helped to get dressed by Cat, who had finally come down from the tree. Asuma soon joined him on the riverbank and, taking a leaf out of Naruto's book, shook himself dry, causing Naruto to get wet. Looking out at the setting sun, Cat decided that it would be better if he carried Naruto. He was getting sluggish in his movements. Hoisting him into his arms, Cat set off with Asuma, keeping pace back to the palace. Why'd you decide to hang out with Naruto? He inquired a bit further down the road when he felt Naruto snoozing in his arms. Asuma looked up at the sky, placing his hands in his pockets. Dad told me about why he brought him along. I was there the night he was born, I remember it. I wanted to make sure I separated him from it. When I saw the way the kids treated him and how he resigned himself to being alone, well, it's not how I'd imagined him to act. So you took pity on him? Cat accused. No. I figured he could use an uncle, he said, pulling out the present Naruto had given him when they first met. Looking over his shoulder, Cat could see the photograph he had taken of the Sarutobis when Naruto was holding Konohamaru a few days after he had been born. He really likes you, you know. You're one of the only people he's ever opened up to so quickly. Kat replied smiling. He's put a lot of trust in you. Don't break it. He warned. I don't plan on it. He said, running his hand lovingly across the photograph. Line. Naruto was once again in the company of the Hokage and the Fire Daimyo as they were concluding their final meeting. He was finishing one of his many sketches, when his head suddenly shot up. Wide-eyed he scanned the area, his ears listening intently. There was a small metallic sound almost like something was about to be released. Looking up he noticed for the first time that the room was empty of guardians. Not one was in the room and the old man hadn't seemed to have noticed the noise. In one swift movement he was on his feet and was standing on the table that separated the two leaders. Closing his eyes he concentrated like he had been shown. There. The metallic thing had been released and was heading towards. Snapping his eyes open he launched himself at the Fire Daimyo. Turning his body in midair he managed to swipe the object from its planned trajectory, landing precariously in front of the Fire Daimyo. Naruto pulled his hand back, revealing the kunai that had been aimed at the daimyo. Bursting through the doors, the fire guardian saw that Naruto had a kunai held pointing towards the daimyo, raising his hand to stop them from advancing any further. That was an incredible catch. You've truly inherited a lot of talent. Naruto, how did you know that was going to happen? Asuma questioned, walking over to the little blonde boy still stood on the table. I heard the sound of scraping metal, Naruto stuttered, but I didn't know where it was heading. I had to wait to find out, he stated, holding out the kunai to Asuma. Kairiku noted where he believed the angle of the kunai was thrown from and caught the guardian's attention, leaving the room with 6 other guardians while the other 4 took up positions around the room. Well, come on Naruto, let's get you away from this hectic situation and get this meeting underway. Asuma inquired, scooping Naruto into his arms and moving towards the door, stooping down to pick up the sketch pad as he passed. Don't worry Dad, I'll look after him, he announced as he passed the Hokage, who had risen from his seat the moment Naruto had jumped onto the table. Line. See, if the Land of Fire had only one king this situation wouldn't have happened, a dark-haired guardian snarled. Kazuma, this situation happened because we were too lax in our protection. If it hadn't have been for Naruto we'd have dead a daimyo on our hands, Kairiku stated. That was a courageous thing to do, you know. But not just anybody can protect the Fire Daimyo, Kazuma accused, directing his scorn at the blonde-haired hero. Well, maybe we should make him an honorary guardian then, a mohawk-wearing guardian stated. Really? Naruto's shy voice asked from the doorway. Well, you did act and do as a guardian would, so why not? To, the only female guardian, stated. Why don't you do the honors, Kazuma? To goaded. Fine. Naruto. Uzumaki, Asuma stated. Naruto Uzumaki, I would formally like to appoint you an honorary fire guardian. Kazuma gritted out. Bowing respectfully and thanks, Naruto then left the room to find Kat. Line. Being in a procession of people was unnerving to Naruto. He'd never been around so many people before. Even walking the streets of Konoha was easier than walking with this group of people. The procession consisted of retainers, teachers, council members, guardians, and all because of one little girl. Kimiko Shijimi, the Fire Lord's daughter, was accompanying her father, the Fire Daimyo, as they walked together towards the town. Well, not exactly together. The Fire Daimyo was at the head of the procession with his advisors, while Kimiko was further back, surrounded by her teachers, each pointing things out and calling to her, trying to gain her attention. She sullenly stared after her father, obviously seeking his attention. Naruto and Kat watched this from the back of the procession. Crossing the bridge, the procession had to either filter out into smaller lines or try to all cross at the same time. Of course, the Fire Daimyo's procession was full of people trying to grab his attention or get into his good graces by teaching his daughter and heir. It was just after the sudden surge of attendance that Kimiko slipped through the railings of the bridge and with a splash landed in the water. It wasn't until the procession had passed the bridge that Naruto noticed that Kimiko was no longer with them. Turning quickly, he noticed the ripples on the river before she emerged, sputtering for breath and thrashing around in the water in her panic. Naruto! Kat shouted, reaching his hand out as Naruto shot past him. Performing a perfect dive into the water, Naruto proceeded to swim out to where the princess had fallen in. Stop thrashing, Naruto commanded, which instantly shocked the princess into stillness, allowing Naruto to maneuver himself around her and slung his arm around her chest and proceeded to swim back to shore, where he allowed Kat to lift the honorable princess onto the bank. Before pulling himself up, Naruto shook himself dry. Water droplets flying everywhere. Turning to Kat, he saw that Kimiko was still sopping wet. Oh, honorable princess, what a silly thing to do, throwing yourself into the river like that. A member of the procession cooed. Yes, now you're all wet. How on earth will you ever get dry now? Someone else agreed. That was a silly thing to do, dear, the Fire Daimyo said, turning to Naruto. Good thing this young man was here. Before walking off at the head of the procession, my lord, Naruto called. She didn't throw herself in, she was pushed. When your procession surged forwards across the bridge, she was unprepared and was thrown through the railings into the water. If you didn't rely so heavily on your retainers they wouldn't constantly search for your attention and Kimiko wouldn't have to vie for your attention. Blasphemy. One retainer shouted. What would you expect from a demon? Came muttered from somewhere in the crowd. The fire daimyo was surprised at this outburst. I'm afraid I don't like your tone, young man. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. He asked, and you seemed like such a nice boy too, he added. Scrunching her face up in anger, Kimiko stated, I would like to stay with Naruto. I will see you at dinner, father. Oh, the fire daimyo was shocked at his daughter's sudden outburst. Very well then, darling, he said before continuing on with his procession towards the town. Thanks, Naruto, Kimiko shyly replied. And you too, Cat, is it? Nodding his head, Cat began leading the way back towards the palace. Heading back to the palace, Kimiko looked at the ground. You know, you're the only person to recognize me by my name. I know what it's like to labeled. Besides Konohamaru, Sarutobi is always referred to as honorable grandson and he's only a couple of months old. Walking a bit further on, Kimiko again looked at the ground before speaking. Why did you save me? Kimiko burst out. I mean, I wasn't very nice to you each time you came to ask if you could play with me. She stared at Naruto, causing her to trip over her wet robes. Because I think you'll make a great ruler one day, but I know you'll make a great friend, he said, holding out his hand for her. She looked at the hand before taking it and smiling. Besides, everyone deserves a second chance. Knocking on the door, Naruto announced his presence to Kimiko, who was reading a book. Looking up from the book, she smiled. You were right, you know. This book is really good. My nanny's read it to me loads of times since you said about it. It's my favorite. Naruto replied, smiling. You wanna play outside? He asked. But what about the other kids? Who cares about them if they won't let us play with them? We've played inside for days now. I don't think there's much more we can do in here and we'll have to face them eventually. We'll play together and have fun, and if they want to join in then we show them. Rising above their taunts. Closing the book, she delicately placed it on the table. Turning, she grinned, taking Naruto's hand. They ran out the door to the garden where the other children would often play. They walked past the children playing a game with a ball, moving to an open area just far enough away from the other children. Naruto hunkered down on his haunches and started marking out a cord of 10 boxes. Looking up, he smiled. Hopscotch. Nodding her head, Kimiko started looking around for something to use as a marker. Returning with a stone, she noticed that Naruto drawn a 1-2-1-2-1-2-1 shaped cord. Throwing the stone, Kimiko landed on the square with 3 inside. Picking the stone up, she gave it to Naruto, who then threw it, causing it to land on the number 4 square. Picking it up, he returned to the beginning and aimed at the 1 square. The stone landed perfectly in the square, allowing Naruto to proceed through the game. After completing the game, Naruto won 6-4. Kimiko decided that they should play hide-and-go-seek. They were suddenly joined by the child with shoulder-length bluish hair. I'm Sora. I was wondering if I could play with you guys. I'm getting a little bored of the ball game. Looking at each other, they smiled. Okay. I'm Kimiko and this is my friend Naruto, Kimiko answered while pointing to both herself then Naruto. I'll start counting to 10 while you two hide. First one found is it next round. Hi, they both chorused before disappearing around the garden. Sora was hiding behind a bush near the other children, while Naruto had snuck underneath the steps leading into the palace. Reaching 10, Kimiko turned round and scanned the area. Not noticing either of the boys, Kimiko started searching in the bushes and trees at the edge of the garden area before moving towards the center of the garden. Looking round, she spotted the robe that Sora was wearing poking out from behind a bush by the other children. Running over to the bush, she jumped behind it, pointing and calling, "Found you!" Sora blinked in surprise, then smirking stood up from his hiding place. Together they continued looking for Naruto. He's under the steps over there. A pair of twin girls pointed to the steps leading into the palace. Running over to the steps, they dropped to the floor looking under and saw Naruto smiling back at them. "Can we play too?" the girls asked. Giving her consent, Kimiko started the next round with Sora seeking this time. He found the twins first, then Kimiko, but was struggling to find Naruto. "Cat," Kimiko called. "Is Naruto on the roof?" "No, but why don't you try looking closer to the ground?" he uttered from his perch on the roof. "Okay Naruto, we give up. Come out." Naruto dropped down from a tree next to the wall. "Can we join in too?" The ball's gone missing, the remaining children asked. "Okay," Kimiko smiled. "I'll be it," Naruto volunteered. Turning so the children could start hiding, he began counting to 10. "You know you didn't have to steal their ball." "I don't know what you're talking about," Cat allured. Chuckling, he moved away, chucking a ball up into the air. "Ready or not, here I come," Naruto shouted, running into the bushes searching for the other children. Sayuri was reading a battered green book often found in a certain blonde-haired boy's hands, absent-mindedly stroking her blonde cat while Konohamaru was asleep, for once. Since Ichiro was away on a mission, Konohamaru had been restless lately. Thankfully Naruto and the old man had just returned from their trip to the fire daimyo, as evidenced by the sleeping boy on the sofa wrapped up in the blanket the Hokage had draped across the back of the sofa. "So when is Ichiro due back?" the Hokage asked, lighting his pipe. "Well, he shouldn't have been sent out anyway, we both know that, but he's as stubborn as you are." She smirked when he found out that he wasn't on that mission, well, you can imagine. She stood up, closing the book and clasped it to her chest, and walked over to the window overlooking Koona. "He should have been back by now," she answered, leaning against the Hokage who had come to lend her his support. Line. Nami, Lady Sarutobi's cat, suddenly woke up from its curled position on the sofa, its head snapping to look out the window at full attention now, like it had sensed something had happened. This was followed by Konohamaru waking from his slumber and screaming out great wailing cries. Naruto, who had also been asleep and woken to stare out the same window that Nami was picking up Konohamaru from where he was lying, his wailing continued even as the pounding rain that had started as soon as Nami had stared out the window continued to fall. "No," she gasped, holding Konohamaru closely to her chest. Line. The ninja were lined in their funeral clothes. The rain that had been plaguing the village of late was still falling, almost like the heavens themselves were crying. The only sound amongst the mourners was that of the wailing baby held tight in his mother's arms, the rain mixing in with her tears. To her side was the third Hokage, pipe noticeably absent, tears freely falling down his face, mourning the loss of yet another shinobi taken before their time. Naruto, dressed in black, stood back from the grieving figures, watching as the shinobi paid their respects before disappearing into the dreary sky. Turning, he saw Asuma Sarutobi move up to stand next Sayuri, the grieving wife and mother, Konohamaru still crying in her arms. Asuma touched her shoulder, turning her to him. He was dressed in the typical black Konoha ninja uniform, complete with flak jacket, regular black shinobi sandals and a black forehead protector, and sash tied around his waist. His hair was now styled into the Sarutobi style, short black spiky hair, with the makings of a beard beginning to grow. He looked like a much younger Ichiro. Seeing this, Sayuri burst into tears and buried her face into his jacket, with Asuma enveloping her into his arms. "You should join them, you know. He was yours too. You have a right to mourn as well," Kat said in a whisper. "But he wasn't really mine," Naruto mumbled, the rain dripping down his face. "Naruto, right now your mom's going to need you. Yes, she's got Asuma and the third to help her, although she's hurting, but you're her family too, don't forget that," Kat voiced before moving back into the shadows, leaving the Sarutobis and Naruto alone at the grave of Ichiro Sarutobi. Naruto, dressed in black top and trousers, made his way towards his pseudo-grandfather, took his hand and placed a white rose on the grave marker, whispering, "You were one heck of a dad," running his fingertips along the inscribed name. He looked up at the third, who smiled gently down at him, tears still leaking from his eyes. Sayuri gave an agonizing sob when she heard Naruto's words. Naruto turned to his mother figure when she continued to sob. Not knowing what to do, he let go of the third's hand and hugged her legs tightly. "Mommy, please don't cry, I know you're hurting, we are too, but you still have Konohamaru and Grandpa and Nami, Uncle Asuma and me. If you still want me, that is," Naruto exclaimed. "Oh Naruto, of course I still want you," she said, wiping away her tears and putting on a smile for him. "You are my son no matter what. I will always love you." She hugged Naruto tightly. "Thank you," she whispered the last part, so only Naruto could hear. "For what?" he whispered, held tightly in her embrace. "For reminding what I still have." She kissed Naruto on the cheek. The rain had stopped some time ago, leaving only the orange of the sky as the sun set. Sayuri with a quiet Konohamaru in her arms, Naruto holding onto her unoccupied hand, and her very prominent family members either side of her. Together they watched the sunset. Chapter 5. Red was everywhere, in every direction he looked. The red swirling mist descended on the village almost as if it had been summoned there. Turning his head, he saw the forest trees ablaze with fire and buildings ripped from their foundations with a swing of his mighty tail. The ground cracked open as a second tail struck the earth. The remaining 7 tails swished menacingly in the air, lashing out haphazardly at the slumbering village. Flowing around the 4 gigantic claws was a river of blood as the people ran aimlessly beneath the claws to a horrific, mutilated death. Turning his muzzle to the sky and releasing a mighty roar causing the sky to split open, awoken by the sudden noise, Naruto shot up from bed covered in a cold sweat, only to realize that it was his scream that had woken him from his nightmare. Cutting his scream off, Naruto clapped his hand over his mouth, breathing heavily through his nose. Naruto's eyes darted around the room. Gazing over at the cot where Konohamaru was asleep, he waited to make sure the 2-year-old really was still asleep. With a swish crack, the room was lit up by lightning, followed by an almighty boom of thunder. Curled up with his thumb stuck in his mouth, hair sticking up in typical Sarutobi fashion and in blue pajamas, was his little brother, Konohamaru, who was facing Naruto, but still fast asleep. Looking through the doorway, he could just make out his mother asleep in the double bed and Nami curled protectively into her side. Realizing his scream probably hadn't woken anyone up, He clambered out of bed and made his way to the playroom where his sketchbook was located, and tucked up in the corner of the room he began sketching what he had just seen. Line: "Sorry I'm late, I'm afraid I got lost on the path of life." Naruto apologized as he knocked on the door to the Hokage's office. Shocked, the Hokage nearly fell off his seat when he heard what Naruto said. He hasn't even met the man and he's already emulating him, the third thought, moving from his chair with his overflowing desk to Naruto. Gently placing his hand on the blonde's back, he guided him over to the piano station behind his door. "It's okay Naruto, at least you turned up this time," the third reproached. Naruto sheepishly ran his hand through his now spiky blonde hair, while pulling at the bottom of his blue hooded top with a black stripe running down both arms. "Naruto, do you know who Kakashi Hatake is?" Kakashi Hatake, known as Sharingan Hatake or Copycat Ninja, graduated as a Jonin age 5 and Chunin 6, son of the White Fang Sakuma Hatake. "Okay, enough. You really need to stop reading the bingo book. Anyway, have you met him?" "It's interesting and I've read everything else." "No, I've not met him." "Why?" "No reason." Flexing his hands, the Hokage began to play a slow melody while Naruto eagerly watched his every movement. "Remember, keep your hands spread like this before you begin your practice," the third demonstrated, spreading his fingers wide. "1 hour Naruto, that's all I want from you. No skipping out," the Hokage sternly warned, returning to his overflowing desk, leaving Naruto to practice the piano situated behind the door. Looking up from his paperwork, the third gazed over at Naruto before his sight was drawn to the pictures of the Hokages lining his wall, finally settling on the last one, the fourth. The blonde-haired, tan-skinned, blue-eyed face of a much older version of Naruto stared out from the frame. "He's so much like you, it's scary," the third thought, remembering the time he had taught a young Minato to play the piano. With a pounding crash, Naruto slammed his hands down on the keys of the old piano. Turning and glaring at the old man, he stood up and angrily made his way over to old man, where with gritted teeth he hissed, "I'm not him." Barely above a whisper, but the third still heard. Turning from one blonde to another, the third didn't have a chance to say anything as his young blonde charge flew out the door, slamming it shut behind him. "Damn it! Why did I send Cat out on a mission?" He grumbled. "I can't go after him yet," he thought, looking at the paperwork littering his desk. "Maybe I should just let him calm down and inform Sayuri." Turning back to his desk, he suddenly thought, how did he know I was looking at that picture? He must have sensed me looking at it. But does he know? The third worriedly thought, looking back at the picture of the fourth line. The sun was setting, its golden glow spreading across the village. Located just outside of Training Ground 3, there stood the memorial stone. It held the names of every shinobi who had died in battle. The sun's glow caused the stone to light up, revealing a small 6-year-old sat in front of it. Leaning forwards, he placed his hand on the stone, then lightly traced across the names with his finger, learning every curve, crevice and scratch that marked the stone. He traced the names several times before he sat back on his legs, kneeling in front of the stone. Moving the bag next to him that he had brought, he slowly emptied it an item at a time, pulling out flowers which he gently placed at the base of the stone. Next was some food, takeaway ramen, which he placed to the left of the flowers. Then he produced some candles, placing them each in height order in a triangle-like shape to the right of the flowers. Then 2 toys, one a blue teddy bear and pink teddy bear, arranged behind the ramen, sitting with their backs to the stone. Then he placed a few ryos and 2 pieces of yen, which were added next to the candles. And finally a picture was added to the pile. It contained an image of the first person on the memorial stone that had died the night the Kyuubi attacked. This was placed behind the flowers. Bending, he lit the candles with the Zippo lighter he had borrowed from his uncle. Naruto, in his blue hoodie and gray shorts, fell back and kneeled. His hair, which had grown back in length, fell forward into his eyes, bowed his head in prayer. The Hokage would find him later after he had fallen asleep in the prayer position. Bending down, he examined the items that Naruto had placed in front of the stone, amazed at the range of things he had bought. Soon he was shocked when he saw the picture and who exactly it was. He looked over at the child, wondering just what he knew of this world. He folded the bag, and as it was tipped upside down, a small item fell onto the ground. Bending to pick it up, he found that he held a small scarecrow figure made from straw, bent ever so gently so as it didn't break. Smirking ever so slightly, he placed the figure on top of the stone, knowing exactly who the present was for. Turning, he saw Asuma and Sayuri approaching. Standing, he moved so that they could see just what Naruto had set out. Asuma stooped and picked Naruto up while gazing at the offering laid out in front of the stone. Sayuri kneeled and traced her hand gently over the name of Ichiro Sarutobi and bowed her head in prayer. Bowing their heads in prayer, the 2 male Sarutobis paid their respect to their fallen family. Standing up, Sayuri joined the 2 males. "It makes you wonder how much he really knows, doesn't it?" Sayuri stated. "We'll just have to wait and see," the third wondered aloud. "He wouldn't let us know even if he did know," Asuma said before turning and taking the sleeping boy home, followed by Sayuri and his father. Line. Screams and shouts filled the air. Terror and fear mingled with the stench of death and decay. He was above them all with the red mist swirling around him. He swiped at the ground with his claws and his tail swishing, tearing up the trees and buildings before flinging them at the hapless people. His fur was dripping with blood as he gnashed his teeth at a new group who had decided to attack. Howling with rage as someone managed to slash across his paw. Lift up his other paw, he slammed it down, feeling the person underneath squishing out. Smirking in glee, his great muzzle turned and released a great ball of energy into the oncoming hordes. Waking up once again in a cold sweat, Naruto frantically searched around the room. Naruto was met with the sight of his mother sat in the rocking chair in the corner of the room. In her arms was Konohamaru being gently rocked back and forth. Obviously she just got him back to sleep. "Naruto? What's wrong?" she asked. Shaking his head, Naruto pulled his knees up to his chest, hugging them close. "Naruto, please talk to me. How can I help you if you won't let me in, please, Naruto?" She placed Konohamaru back into his cot bed thing and walked over to the wardrobe where she pulled something out. "I'm here if you need me, you know that." She placed the item in her hand onto Naruto's bed, before walking out the door. Looking up from his knees, Naruto saw the teddy bear he was given the day he was born. It was small and had originally been white. It had 2 brown patch marks, one on each foot and another on the top of his head just next to his ear. He had a small face with a big brown nose and small black eyes. He was made out of that soft material that was ultra mega soft. The old man had given him it, to help him sleep as a baby. He smiled fondly at the bear. It was called Line. "I'm getting worried, Asuma. Sayuri confessed something's up with Naruto. He's got black eyes, almost like he hasn't slept in days. He's becoming withdrawn and it's getting worse. I'm scared he'll go back to how he was before we took him in." She stopped the washing up that she was doing and turned to her brother-in-law as he finished off the plate he was drying. "What was he like before, I mean?" he questioned, placing his tea towel on the counter as he sat down on the island counter that separated him from Sayuri. Turning, she dried her hands on Asuma's discarded tea towel. "He was quiet. Quieter than he is now." She took a breath. "You know, when I spotted him after I left the orphanage, I thought he was a ghost or something. There was no way someone would let a child out by themselves at night, but there he was. He was so malnourished, his clothes, which were torn and dirty, were way too big for him. He was covered in dirt, but you could just make out his wild blonde hair and his eyes. His eyes were so empty, like he had seen things no 3-year-old should. As I moved to get closer to him, he vanished." Imagine my surprise when he turned up the next day at the old man's office. He was so quiet. As I drew closer, I realized he was signing to the old man. I questioned him, which must have startled him, as his eyes, which had been so warm before, had suddenly become empty and wide. He bowed quickly and then moved incredibly fast out the door. The old man was shocked. When I explained how I had first encountered the boy, he was fuming. "I think if I hadn't have seen him that night, he might not be where he is now. He's really come out of his shell, hasn't he?" "Yeah. I just don't think he trusts me." "What makes you say that?" "He woke up in the middle of the night the other day, and when I went to comfort him, he retreated into himself." She started to cry. "I'm sure he trusts you, he just probably doesn't know how to tell you," Asuma said, standing and taking her into his arms. He lightly kissed her forehead as a sign of comfort. Naruto was stood behind the door. He'd heard the entire conversation. Moving away quietly, he headed to the bedroom. Bear Naruto, with his bear tucked tightly in his arms, knocked on the Hokage's door, knowing that he was in there. Hearing the call to enter, he did so, and when seeing that Bear was indeed in the room, the 6-year-old ran over to him and stopping just short. I've been having nightmares. And I didn't want Mom to worry, but I don't think she can help me this time. But you're an expert in the mind, you should be able to help me." He handed over his sketchbook. "Please, Bear," he pleaded. Ibiki looked up to the Hokage before looking back down at Naruto. "I don't know how I can help, little one," he said, going down to Naruto's level. "What happens in your nightmares, Naruto?" the third asked, moving around his desk so he was level with Ibiki. "Everything's red. I'm towering above everything and there's blood and bodies everywhere, and then my tails and claws destroy the village. It's kinda like I'm the fox demon that attacked," Naruto whimpered. Ibiki and the third began to flick through the sketchbook. Looking through the sketchbook, each picture depicted a scene of destruction involving the Kyuubi. The order of the pictures showed how the events unfolded exactly on the night of the attack. "Naruto, where are you in all this?" the Hokage asked, dreaded the answer. "I'm the demon causing all the chaos," he said, headbutt. "I don't understand why though?" "I'm not old enough to remember this," he asked. Looking between each other, the two shinobi didn't know how to answer. "Naruto, can you wait outside for a minute, please?" the third requested. "Why did he come to you? What does he think you can do?" the third continued. "Maybe he thinks I can ease it from his mind, because I'm good with the mind?" Ibiki replied, running his hand over his bandana. "Or maybe you could explain it to him so that he understands and doesn't have to be afraid anymore," Kat said as he entered the room through the window. covered in mud and showing a few more cuts and bruises than necessary. He wants reassurance that he isn't that monster and that they're just dreams. Cat continued stretching as his squad appeared in the window behind him. But how do I explain that to him? Ibiki questioned, worried that the boy had chosen him for this task. Carefully. He's not an idiot, he'll pick up on things quickly. So much so that he may have figured it out already and he just needs to hear somebody say it. Cat signaled for his team to disappear quickly, then jumped on the window. Why me? Ibiki queried. It makes no sense, because it has to be someone who doesn't know him that well. That can see past everything, he said, faded into the background. Naruto, you can come in now, the Hokage called. Opening the door, the blonde peeked in, before tentatively walking over to the duo. He stood head-bowed waiting for one of them to say something. Naruto, Ibiki began. You're not the fox demon. Your mind has just conjured up these images, probably from all the books you've been reading. It's not you who killed those people and destroyed the village. Your mind is playing on your fear. That's all. He explained. Naruto nodded and clutched his teddy bear tighter to his body. Now I think your mother is worried about you, Naruto. Maybe you should tell her you were having nightmares. The third suggested, handing Naruto back his sketchpad. Turning out the door, Naruto was called back suddenly. You forgetting something, Naruto? Thank you, bear, he bowed. Hey, where's my hug? The Hokage pouted. Giggling, Naruto threw himself into the third's outstretched arms, hugging him tightly with his arms full. The third gave a squeeze back before letting him go out the room, closing the door behind him. Turning back to the window, the third found that Cat and his team had returned. Turning to Ibiki, he demised him, then turned back to the Anbu squad in front of him. How was your mission? The third asked as Ibiki closed the door behind him. Line. Grandpa, what was Ko's first word? Naruto asked from his position on the sofa, causing the members of the room to jump in shock, as no one had realized he was there during their meeting. Either Mom or Naruto. Why? The third asked, knowing that there was an explanation for this sudden outburst. What was mine? Naruto moved on to his next question, unfurling himself so that he was stood on the floor. Lord, when you were 3. Thinking quickly, the third tried to pull the memory forward. It was demon when I was 1. You were so angry I thought I'd done something wrong, so I didn't speak to you again until you mentioned I should have been talking by now and I called you Cage, not Lord, Naruto stated almost angrily. Head bowed so you couldn't see his face. Why did you say demon? A shinobi asked. It's all anyone ever said around me, that or monster, that thing should be killed. Is it any wonder why my first word was demon? He snorted. Naruto, why did you? The third got cut off. Because October is a bad time for me. I was wondering if there was any way I could go away just for like a week or two so the villagers can vent without me around, Naruto requested. He lifted his head to reveal his bruised and swollen face. Looking at Naruto, the shinobi realized that his clothes were slightly torn and what they could see of his skin was either bruised or bleeding. I'll get Yuri, Takumi Asuma suggested, moving to the door. You requested me, Lord Hokage. An old man with white hair that just covered his head and a mustache covering his top lip entered the room. Ah, Naruto, should we not get that fixed? No, he said, holding out his hand to the young boy. Taking the doctor's hand, Naruto followed him into the adjoining medical room that was situated to the left of the meeting room. It had been specifically set up for Naruto. Seeing the look on the shinobi's faces, the third explained a bit about the situation. Yuri Takumi is the only doctor willing to go anywhere near Naruto, and the only one Naruto isn't afraid of as well. He's been Naruto's personal doctor since he was little, he explained. And I didn't know he was there either, he stated. When did he come in here actually? He thought, watching as Naruto came back out with a lollipop stuck in his mouth, holding the doctor's hand. I'll take him home, Lord Hokage, Yuri said as he walked towards the door. Wait, can I leave the village or not? Naruto pulled the lollipop from his mouth, determination evident in his eyes. Where would you go? The Hokage quizzed, knowing that he would have to answer the boy's question. I have somewhere in mind. He twinkled, looking over at Asuma mischievously, before moving over to the doctor again and disappearing out the door. Line. Cat needed to get Naruto back for the Mother's Day celebration with the Sarutobis. They'd just collected the flowers from the Yamanaka flower shop, where they discovered Naruto had a natural gift with flowers. He'd picked out a few orchids, a couple of daisies, 3 lilies, 2 pink tulips and a red and white rose. Why did he ask for a lily and the white rose to be separate? Cat wondered. Line. Cat, can we make a quick stop before heading home please? Naruto asked as the two were walking through the village. Sure. But where are we going? You'll see. The childish glint in Naruto's eye didn't bode well for Cat. Making their way towards the edges of town, the duo slowly entered the graveyard, moving past small area where the civilian graves made of white stone are situated through to the shinobi grave markers. This area is considerably bigger and filled with a lot more white stone markers. Moving through the aisles like he's done it 1,000 times before, Naruto stops at the 12th aisle up, continuing moving across to the right. Finally stopping at a stone marker near the right, Naruto kneels in front of it, head bowed. He whispers something so fleetingly that Cat is able to hear it from where he is moving towards him. Finally reaching the blonde-haired 6-year-old, he is able to see whose marker he has stood in front of. "Naruto, do you know who's buried here?" Cat asked worriedly. "Of course," Naruto replied. "Place the white rose and lily on the white stone marker." Then bowing and making a prayer, Naruto moves away from the stone with Cat trailing behind. "I'll have to tell the Hokage about this," Cat thought as he took a glance back at the stone, reading the name Kushina Uzumaki. Line, "Cat, that's Mom's cat lying on the floor there, isn't it?" Naruto pointed to the prone figure lying in the path leading towards the Sarutobi residence. "Those callous bastards," Cat exclaimed. "Naruto, don't touch it." "Naruto, but it's Mom's cat, I can just leave it there." Naruto panicked. "Naruto, it's..." Cat hesitated by trying a different approach to get Naruto moving. "Your mom will have to find out soon. There's got to be something I can do. Mom loves this cat. Mom needs this cat." "Naruto, there's nothing you can do." Cat's voice sounded defeated. "Yes, I can." Defiance in the edge of his voice. "How the..." Cat whispered in awe. "When the hell did you learn that?" As both Naruto and the cat were enveloped in smoke. Line, "Ko, be careful, okay? I'll be right back with some juice, okay?" Naruto said. Naruto left the front room to collect the juice for the two of them. Sayuri was in the kitchen preparing lunch. Konohamaru watched as Naruto left the room, then crawled over to the chair, pulled himself up into a standing position. Thoroughly pleased with himself, he made sure he was as balanced as possible, then toddled over to the doorway Naruto had gone through. Naruto had opened the fridge, pulled a chair and located the orange juice. He carefully pulled the orange juice from his shelf and clambered down, then placed it in the island. He moved the chair over to the cupboard, allowing the fridge to close. Climbing onto the chair again, he pulled out 2 cups, one for him and a sippy cup for Ko. He clambered down again and this time moved the chair to the island, all under the watchful eye of his mother, who was preparing the snacks of fruit for the boys. He carefully poured a little bit of the juice into the cups, when Sayuri picked them up and added water to a certain level on each cup and placed the lid on, while Naruto put the juice away. Ko toddled over to the island as Naruto was pouring the juice and clambered up onto the chair before making onto the counter as Naruto jumped down and moved the chair so he could put the juice away. Turning to place the cups on the counter, Sayuri was surprised to see Ko sat there. "How did you get there, Ko?" she asked. "I walked. Then climbed chair." "Thank you," he replied, being handed the sippy cup. "Well, someone takes after their brother, don't they?" she said, placing Ko back on the floor, then handed Naruto his cup. "I'll be out in a second, boys. Keep an eye on him, Naruto, please," Sayuri asked as she returned to the kitchen. Line, Cat and Naruto entered the Sarutobi residence and started to place the various flowers in different vases and proceeded to place the flowers in different rooms. After they had done this, Asuma entered the house with little Konohamaru resting on his hip and several paint pots in the other hand. Placing Ko down on his feet, he toddled over to Naruto. "We get paints. Which room first?" He stumbled through his words cutely. "We're going to finish the playroom first. Cat, can you get me a copy of the photos I gave you, please?" Naruto told the people in the room. Disappearing, Cat went off to do his job, while Asuma took the paints to the playroom. Naruto took Konohamaru's hand and walked together to the playroom. Naruto pointed to a paint pot which Asuma opened. Getting the paintbrushes, Naruto handed one to Ko and showed him how to paint on the wall. "This is the only time you can paint on the wall, okay?" Naruto asked Konohamaru. Receiving a nod, he started on the wall next to Konohamaru while Asuma picked a different wall entirely. They were halfway through the room when Cat appeared clutching a load of photos. Naruto took the original photos and with practiced ease started replacing them into their original positions, while Cat took over painting. Returning to the room, Naruto got Cat to follow him into the second room they were going to decorate. "Can you paint that wall first, please, Cat?" Naruto implied while pointing at the wall opposite the window. Nodding his head, Cat opened the pot of paint that he'd brought in from the other room. Making his way back to the playroom, he found Asuma had lifted Konohamaru up so that he could reach the higher parts of the wall. Konohamaru was giggling in delight, as Asuma tickled him every time he moved his brush off the wall. Smiling, Naruto walked over to the right-hand wall that Asuma had finished painting earlier. Making sure it was dry, he started to draw out the shape he wanted painted on the wall like a mural. Asuma, seeing that Naruto was back in the room, moved Konohamaru so that he could begin on the next wall. He picked Naruto up when he realized the 6-year-old hadn't figured out how to reach the high parts of the wall. "When did you want me to swap with the old man and distracting your mom?" he asked while lifting Naruto higher up the wall. "When both rooms are painted, I'd like Grandpa to do the calligraphy I'm planning. Hopefully he'll be good at the fine detail I have planned." He continued to draw on the wall. "Just a little higher, please," he asked. Konohamaru came running over to the two. Tugging on the pant legs, he indicated across the room, showing that all the places he could reach were indeed covered in paint. Cat entered the room at that moment. Sensing this, Naruto finished his outline and turned in Asuma's arms. "Cat, can you help me finish this room please? And Asuma and Ko, can you finish in Mom's bedroom please? When it's finished you can swap with Grandpa, Uncle Suma," Naruto ordered. Easily swapping places, so the cat then held Naruto. Asuma scooped up Konohamaru and proceeded into their designated areas. Finishing the drawing on the wall, Naruto leaned back into Cat's arms. "Can you move me to the wall with the windows please?" Naruto pointed to the wall on his left. Moving as asked, the two drew the final pattern on the wall. It took up the entire center of the wall. Pleased with his design, Naruto signaled that he wanted to be put down. "Do you think they'll like it?" Naruto worried. "Stop worrying about it," Cat assured. "They'll love it because you did it together, and even when asked you won't say it was me not them. You'll include everyone." Cat lovingly ran his hand through Naruto's hair. "Come on, one room left till the Hokage takes over." Moving into the bedroom, the two saw that the room had been finished and that Konohamaru was arranging the pictures into what he believed to be the earliest image with Asuma's help. Leaning over Konohamaru, Naruto moved a picture that was bigger than the rest into the center. Eyes widened, Konohamaru started moving the pictures to go around the center image. Watching this, Cat and Asuma turned when Naruto moved away. Watching as he started drawing on another wall. "He's really going all out," Asuma thought. Leaving Cat to watch over Konohamaru, he moved so that he was watching Naruto, who was in the corner of the room drawing a rather elegant shape that started at the base. It went up till it was too high for him to reach. Picking Naruto up and arranging him so that it was comfortable for him to draw, watched as the shape flourished to life. "Done it, Naruto," Konohamaru called, moving aside so that they could see his masterpiece. "Great work, Ko. Now we just have to get it on the wall." Naruto smiled, hugging his little brother close. Looking up at Asuma, he said, "You can swap with Grandpa now." Line. "I know that Naruto's up to something, old man, whether you tell me or not." Sayuri said, her arms hooked through his arm, walking through the village marketplace, browsing through the shops. Chuckling, he continued walking along the road, his daughter-in-law keeping pace next to him. They'd passed many vendors selling fruit, flowers, jewelry, gifts, vegetables, clothes and all other sorts of knickknacks. "He told you about the nightmares?" the third asked. "Yeah, he hasn't seemed to have had any more. I gave him Ro. He sleeps better with that bear, I think," Sayuri replied. "I wonder how he knew about those events though." "He's a lot smarter than you think, old man," she said, intertwining her arm in his again. They continued walking through the shopping district. They were just coming up to a coffee shop when Asuma popped up. "How about I buy you a cup of coffee, sis?" He smiled charmingly at the two while indicating at the coffee shop and holding out his crooked arm, hoping she would take it. "Now I know that whatever Naruto's planning, you're both in on it." She shook her head. "He doesn't have to try so hard." "I don't think he's doing it just for you. He's doing it for all of us," the third stated, hugging her close and then walking away. Turning, she took Asuma's arm and entered the coffee shop. Making their way to the counter, she told him what she wanted and made her way back out the shop to sit at a table set up outside the store. Sitting down, she watched as the village bustled around her. She was handed a cup of coffee as Asuma sat opposite her. "I reckon one day Naruto will change the world. Not just us or this village, he will make an impact that nobody will be able to comprehend," she said, cupping the coffee that Asuma handed her. "That's because of you," Asuma said. Reaching across the table, he took her hand and squeezed it tight for a moment. Line. The Hokage entered the house and made his way up the stairs, where he sensed his two grandsons. Walking into the room, he found both boys covered in paint and the floor thankfully covered in paper, which was covered in paint. Cat turned to the Hokage, bowed his head in acknowledgement. Smiling, the Hokage watched as Konohamaru, with his hands stained green, placed his finger to Naruto's nose, giving him a green nose to add to his blue cheeks. Blowing his bangs out of his eyes, Naruto looked up at the Hokage. He tugged at his hair, with red-stained hands. It was too long in his opinion. "Don't even think about getting another haircut." The third growled. "It's only just grown back and you're still being punished for that stunt." "It's my hair," he growled right back. "If you didn't keep looking at that damn picture," he muttered. "Paint," Konohamaru piped up, holding up a paintbrush between the two, stopping the impending argument. Moving away from each other, Naruto motioned at the wall by the window, taking their paintings and bowing respectfully to his leader, left the room. The Hokage found the drawings on the wall that Naruto had drawn, and as he was asked, started to go over the sketches in the bedroom, while Cat took Konohamaru to get bathed as he was covered in paint. Naruto was in the bedroom going over his sketch on the right-hand wall. Cat had procured him a ladder so he could reach it all. His tongue was sticking out as he slowly and carefully added the detail to the drawing. He was about halfway through when the old man walked through the doorway. "You're very talented, Naruto, even as a 6-year-old painter." The third tentatively complimented, admiring the beginnings of the mural. "Do you think Mom will like it?" He ignored the compliment, worrying at his bottom lip. "I know she will. Now what was it you wanted me to write?" He smiled, turning the worried boy in his hands. Something wise and sentimental, I suppose. When you've done that, would you mind doing this wall please?" he asked, pointing to the wall between two windows in the playroom. "Of course, Naruto." The third answered, giving the boy a hug. Climbing back up the ladder, Naruto picked up his paintbrush covered in black paint and continued his painted ascent up the wall. Chuckling, the third made his way back to the bedroom. Pulling out his pipe, he started to light it when a voice rang out. "Don't light it up in this house," followed by a second younger voice. "No smoking in the house," from the other end of the house, followed by a splash and a squeal. "Out of bathco. We've got to sort dinner out yet." "Ramen," came the muffled shout. Cat was obviously towel drying Konohamaru. Smirking, Naruto stopped his painting. Looking at where he got to, he was nearly done, just the last big detail and a few final touches. "Last resort, Ko," he laughed. "No ramen," he said, running into the room bundled up in a towel. "Wow," he exclaimed, seeing the mural Naruto had finished painting and applying the final touches. "Hey! No dripping in the playroom," Naruto chuckled, descending the ladder. "Fine, we'll get ramen, but only when you're dry and dressed." "If we get ramen today, that means no ramen later in the week," Naruto stated, crouching down to Konohamaru's level. Pouting, Konohamaru crossed his arms. "Fine," he muttered. Smiling, Naruto ran his hands through his little brother's hair. Before chucking him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, he charged down the hall to their bedroom. Line. Konohamaru, wearing his yellow top with a red leaf spiral painted on the front and gray shorts, was stood in front of Naruto, who was wearing a long-sleeved gray top, dark blue trousers and blue sandals. "Ko, can you show Mom our surprises, please?" Seeing the nod, he continued. "The flowers first, then the playroom, and then her room, okay? Grandpa's here too, don't forget. I'm going to get the dinner, okay?" "Okay," Konohamaru replied. "I'll set the table." He turned, walking out of the room and bumping down the stairs on his bum. He wandered into the kitchen as he was followed down the stairs by Naruto and Cat. Line. Walking through the village, Naruto watched as the villagers bustled about around him, not noticing his presence yet again. Making his way past a store, he felt Cat leave his side, looking back at the store as the door closed. He couldn't see what sort of store it was. Shrugging, he made his way to a Karuka ramen bar. It was run by the father-daughter team of Tuchi and Ayame. "Good evening, Tuchi and Ayame. How are you both today?" Naruto greeted the pair. "Oh, hi, Naruto," Ayame waved from behind the counter. "We're good, thanks." "Who asked this time, you or Konohamaru?" Tuchi asked. Ko did. Can we have the usual, please? 1 beef, 2 pork, 1 chicken, and 1 special, please?" Naruto asked, adding on the extra meals. "Oh, and then 2 beef and 2 porks and a special, please?" The two got to work preparing the meals. Feeling Cat return, he turned round to see that Cat was indeed behind him. "Do you think Grandpa's Onbu guards are hungry?" Naruto asked. "That's very kind of you, Naruto. I'm sure they'll be hungry." Cat's husky voice rang out. "Not interested in where I went?" he coaxed. "I figure you'll tell me if it's important," Naruto stated, watching as the ramen was cooked. Collecting the bags, the two headed back to the Sarutobi residence. Line. Sayuri was dressed in a loose-fitting dress with an apron, and her normally kind and welcoming face was smiling at the flowers placed around her house. Asuma entered after her, watching as she found everything that the boys had planned for her. Hearing the padding of feet coming down the stairs, he turned to see Konohamaru carefully coming down the stairs with the third walking behind him. Finally reaching the floor, Konohamaru ran over to his mom and hugged her legs tight. "Happy Mother's Day, Mommy," he preened, looking up at her and handing her the card he had made for her earlier, with the paint used for the rooms they had decorated. "Come on, Mommy, we decorated," he said, pulling on her hand, trying to lead her up the stairs. "Oh dear," Sayuri laughed. "Not oh dear, Mommy, we did good job. And we all helped." He smiled as he finally got his mom to follow him up the stairs to the landing. Letting go of her hand, he allowed her to go into bedroom. Sayuri's bedroom was painted a sky blue color, and then there was a painting on the right of the wall facing you as you entered the room. It was a painting of a sakura tree blossoming and the blossoms floating in the wind. And written in kanji down the wall next to it in silver paint was the words, "Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine flows into trees." Turning round, she found she was facing a collage of photos. The photos ranged from now to back when she and Ichiro had first started dating. Starting in the middle with the biggest picture and branching out around it were other pictures of them together, with Konohamaru, the old man, and Naruto. The shape of the photos together was almost like a sun with rays reaching out. Moving out of her room, she proceeded to the playroom, which was previously unfinished was now finished, had all its furniture finished and placed in the correct place, as well as freshly decorated walls. There was the leaf symbol taking up the center of the wall as you walked in. The wall was a pale yellow while the symbol was a dark green color. And on the wall to the right as you walked in was a huge mural of the photo Cat had taken when Konohamaru was born. It was a black paint copy of them sat on the couch, the third handing Konohamaru. Naruto sat in Sayuri's lap and Ichiro leaning over the couch. With one addition, Asuma was leaning over the old man's shoulder, almost like he was part of the original photo. Naruto walked in behind the Sarutobis. He walked up to Konohamaru and placed his arm around him. "Wow, that's incredible." "Oh Naruto." "Naruto, it's amazing," Sayuri said with tears in her eyes. Naruto hugged her with Konohamaru joining in. Ko helped too. "And so did Grandpa and Uncle Suma," Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head with his hand. "You always said you wanted it finished, so we did. We finished it for you. And your bedroom too, so you have somewhere tranquil and peaceful to relax and just be you," Naruto said. "We got you flowers and dinner too," Konohamaru added. Ramen. He grabbed his mom's hand and proceeded to drag her back to the kitchen where the table was set and the ramen had been placed. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Naruto said as he hugged his mom in the middle of the kitchen. Walking over to a corner of the room, he tugged on something, causing the Anbu who had been stationed in that corner to appear. "If you and your team are hungry, I bought more so you could have some too," he said before taking his place at the table. Slowly the Anbu all materialized and picked up one of the extra servings of ramen and returned to their stations. "Naruto, you didn't have to do all this for me. The flowers would have done fine," Sayuri said, running her fingers through his hair. "You shouldn't have to do everything. And today's your day off. I just wanted you to be happy. I didn't want you to be sad when you thought of Dad and that you needed a place where you could be free from your troubles. Now with the playroom finished, we can play in there while you relax in your room. Besides, you're my mom and you're special to me," Naruto stated. "And me," Konohamaru seconded. Sayuri scooped both boys into her arms and hugged them tight. "I love you both," she smiled. Birthday. Two figures walked through the trees, the foliage shielding them from the burning sun high above them. The elder of the two, dressed in traditional Hokage robes, pulled off his ceremonial hat which he always wore, wiped at his brow as sweat started to mingle there, with his long-robed sleeve. Looking down at his young companion, hair sticking flat to his face, and watched as he ran a hand through his hair, water droplets cascaded around him. Pulling at the neck of his t-shirt uncomfortably, the child looked up at his grandpa, wondering why they were outside in this heat. Sensing the question in the child's eyes, the Hokage replaced his hat on his head and quickly moved between the trees to appear in a clearing. Turning back, he watched as his young charge managed to toddle through the gap in the trees that he had just vacated. "Grandan, why we here?" Konohamaru asked, once again pulling at his t-shirt which was sticking to him. Looking round the clearing, the 3-year-old spotted a house with a small porch running round the outside with a shoji board placed on the walkway. The sliding door opened. "Uncle Suma!" Konohamaru cried, running as fast as his little legs would carry him, and leapt into his uncle's startled but outstretched arms. "You're back. What you doing here?" he clamored. "What is it with you kids and calling me Uncle Suma rather than Asuma?" he said, shaking his head. "Yeah, I'm back, and it's an early birthday present from Dad. This is my house where I live, and you are going to help me put things away. But why you live here? What wrong with us?" Konohamaru pushed back so he could see Asuma's face. "Nothing's wrong with you. I was staying with you till I managed to get myself sorted, as well as helping your mom. Kinda like Naruto stays with you," Asuma explained. Chuckling, the Hokage joined the two on the walkway of the porch. Turning, he looked back at the route they had walked and realized he should probably not have taken the scenic route. "Can we give Naruto a birthday present?" Konohamaru asked, startling both adults. Neither one had thought about Naruto's upcoming birthday, both preoccupied with other thoughts surrounding that day. The third was walking through the market district with Naruto walking alongside him. They were looking for a new book for Naruto. Naruto had exhausted his library at the tower, barring the restricted section that was, but he wasn't going to trust anybody in there, especially a 6-year-old. Naruto, as it had turned out, had also read all the books in the Konoha library that he had got his hands on, so this endeavor was proving rather difficult. Naruto the third called, looking towards the boy staring at something in a shop window further up the street. Glancing back at the window, Naruto walked over to the Hokage, humming to show that he was paying attention. "What do you want for your birthday?" he queried. Naruto blinked owlishly at the third. "I already asked to be able to leave the village, didn't I? But that doesn't really count as a present, something you can keep." The third tried to explain. "I don't really want anything, but you can keep letting me leave the village every year." Naruto smirked. "Fine." Sighing, "What were you looking at anyway?" the third asked. "Nothing," Naruto chimed, turning back and continuing along the road. Walking past the window, the third saw a hat with eyes and teeth and a black nose, which kind of looked like a walrus. Sitting on the cozy little sofa in the living room of the Sarutobi house, Naruto was sketching in his sketchbook while huddled up in the corner of the sofa. Konohamaru was on the floor coloring a picture of some sorts, and Sayuri was sat on the other end of the couch, her head buried in papers scattered about the surface area around her. "Naruto, what do you want for your birthday?" Konohamaru asked innocently, glancing up at the two figures on the sofa before continuing with his coloring. Asuma stuck his head through the doorway from the kitchen area, Sayuri lifted her head from her papers and looked over at Naruto, both adults hoping that he would answer with an idea this time. I don't really want anything, Ko. If I need it I get it. How do you get it though? You've never asked me for anything. Sayuri stated. But there must be something you want, Naruto? Asuma asked. Your pot's burning, Uncle Suma, Naruto stated, causing Asuma to retreat back into the kitchen as the smell of burning reached the living room. Not really, Grandpa's in charge of my money, so I normally ask him for the money then buy whatever it is I need. I don't like asking. What about something you like? Konohamaru asked. You like books and drawing. What about something you enjoy? Makes you happy, he continued, coloring in an intricate pattern, sticking his tongue out in concentration. Damn genius, Naruto pouted at his little brother who took after him so much. Idiot, the child stuck his tongue out at the older brother. Sighing, Naruto placed his sketchbook down. To be honest, Ko, to me it's just another day. Besides, I'm never here for it anyway. Okay then, Konohamaru said, putting away his colors, then standing in front of Naruto. I still want to get you something though. He then turned and headed into the kitchen as the sounds of plates being placed down began filling the room. Why do we let Uncle Suma cook again? Naruto quipped, smirking, placing his sketchbook down to join the two in the kitchen. Because he needs to learn to cook and because he loves us. Enough to poison us, Naruto quipped as Sayuri entered the room. I'm not going to poison you, Asuma remarked, clipping Naruto round the head playfully as he placed the dish on the counter. Sayuri took her place at the counter in between Naruto and Konohamaru, with Asuma the other end, also between the two boys. Making sure everyone was seated, he pulled the lid off of the dish to reveal a chicken casserole. Instantly the boys brightened. Carefully placing a ladle or two on the plates set out before them, they dug in. Asuma looked out over the clearing, which posed as his garden. Looking out to the front, he saw Naruto entering the property through the correct entrance. Glad you can come through the pathway and not the trees, Asuma smirked, referring to his father's entrance the other day. Sometimes, he quipped. Ko said you got your own house. Does that mean we can visit you, or do you rather we not? Naruto dug his foot in the ground waiting for the answer. Naruto, you can visit anytime, just try to give me some warning. Besides, I'm not going to let you and Ko turn into old fogies like that old man. Now Ichiro's no longer around, I figure I can help Sayuri out and get to know both of my nephews better, he said, hugging the blonde close to reassure him. So what do you want for your birthday? What is it with you lot and asking about my birthday? It's just another day to me. I don't celebrate it for the same reason you never thought about it before. Now are we going to practice or not? He stormed, getting into a stance ready to begin practice. Stalking his prey, his blue eyes glistened in the light, creeping ever closer. With a wiggle of its rear, Nami pounced and landed in an empty orange jacket that was heaped on the floor. Finding the tassel, Nami's eyes went huge. Instantly the crazed killer that was turned into a playful little cute fluff ball, clawing at the tassel, biting, flipping and purring. Looking up at the person who had walked in on Nami's cute time, saw Sayuri staring down. Smiling, she reached out for the jacket. Naruto won't be happy with you clawing at his orange jacket like that, she reproached the cat, who rolled over and standing began to weave in and out of her legs. What do you think Naruto wants for his birthday? I don't want anything, Mom, Naruto said as he came down the stairs and walked past her, taking his jacket and out the door. Running back, he hugged her. Love you, Mom, be back soon. He pulled his bag higher up his shoulder and met Asuma at the gates. Mom, can we throw Naruto a birthday party? Konohamaru piped up from his seat at the piano in the Hokage's office, with the old man seated on the stool next to Konohamaru, teaching him how to play. He said it was just another day for him though. Asuma lazed on the couch, cigarette dangling from his lips. But if we celebrated it on the first Monday after his birthday, it would be a surprise and a chance for him to have a normal proper birthday for a change, the third said, pulling his pipe away from his lips and emptying the contents before packing it again and relighting it. He just hides from it, I think, and he probably doesn't know what to do for a birthday because he's never celebrated one or been invited to one. The third stated, running his hands over the next set of keys in the composition he was teaching his grandson. What do you think, Cat? He spends more time with you than anyone, really? Sayuri asked, glancing up from her tea. I think it would be nice for him. Moving from the shadows, Cat's mask appeared next to Nami, who was lounging on the desk in between the piles of paperwork. Reaching out his hand, Cat lazily stroked along the cat's spine. With the festival that happens every year on that date, it's probably not appropriate to celebrate, so allowing him to enjoy a day would be good by him rather than shunning it as he does. Cat answered. But what do we get him? He doesn't answer when we ask, Asuma stated. He likes to garden. He's such a natural at it. The plants he has are in amazing shape. Perhaps a garden would be an idea, or a new plant. He's thinking of asking you for his own apartment in the housing district not too far from here. He's already got it picked out. He's just got to ask you for it, Lord Hokage. Cat remarked, Cat's got to give a present to Konohamaru called from his seat at the piano. I've got an idea. Cat smirked, stroking Nami again before moving back into the shadows. He was looking at a weird hat the other day, the third said. The one that looks like a walrus? Sayuri asked. There are pajamas he could use too. We'll make a cake and give him presents too. Konohamaru gleefully played the composition he'd been taught. Line. Greeting the gate guards, Naruto walked past, looking out the path leading away from the village. He waited, teetering on the edge of the framework of the gate, going onto tiptoes, craning his neck. The gate guards watched, a mixture of emotions crossing their faces. A shadow fell across them all. Looking up, they were greeted by two young chunin, one with brown hair and dark eyes. His hair is combed down and falling in between his eyes. His forehead protector was worn like a bandana and was dressed in the standard outfit with his shirt stopping at his chin. The other had black shaggy hair and 3 white plasters, one on each cheek and the final one on his chin, and the standard chunin uniform on. And a cat-masked Onbu stood just behind them. What do you two want? The chunin behind the desk sneered at the younger chunins, talking to his partner. They're your replacements. The Hokage has requested your presence, the cat-masked Onbu stated from behind the young chunins, causing them both to jump. Scowling, the two older chunin stood from their desk casting a glare, and Naruto, who had turned when he heard Cat's voice, made their way past the two younger chunin, making sure to barge past them. Are all older ninja like that? Naruto asked. I thought they only treated me bad. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. The two chunin turned to each other and shrugged. I'm Kotetsu Agane and this is Izumo Kamizuki. We're the new gate guards. Nice to meet you. They each held out a hand to Naruto, who shook them. I'm Naruto. It's nice to meet you both. I'm going to leave with Cat now. Have fun guarding the village and the villagers. It's the best mission you can get, he said, walking over to Cat, who teleported them away. He seemed nice, Kotetsu said, relaxing back in his seat. Very polite, Izumo agreed. Line. Cat teleported the two to the top of the Hokage mountain, looking out over the village. Naruto staring out at the tree line showing the village borders. Sighing, Cat walked over to the edge and sat down. I love this place. It's peaceful and serene, and you can look out at the village and remember just why I love it so much. Life is hard and unjust, and sometimes you find a little ray of sunshine that makes everything seem so much better. And you hope that will never change. Cat stopped to look up at Naruto as he came over to sit beside him. You're my ray of sunshine, Naruto. My sister died when you were born. She was my entire world. She was an Onbu medic nin. When she died, my entire world crumbled, but then I saw you, this little bundle of blonde, huddled in the third's arms. And then watching as you grew up with the guardianship of the Sarutobis and the way you brightened the hearts. As I got to know you, you became more and more important to me. You're my precious person, Naruto, and I won't let anything happen to you. I want you to have as normal a life as you can. That includes birthdays. He turned so he was now kneeling in front of the seated boy. Happy birthday, Naruto, he said, pulling out a small wrapped package and handed it to the surprised child. You shouldn't hide from your birthday, Naruto. You remember how you liked the whole flying experience? Well, I've got just the thing for you. I was about 5 when my parents died, and I remember I came up here and the fourth found me and he showed me how to fly. He was an incredible ninja, Naruto. But he was a great man too. Don't blame people for seeing him in you. You're a great person too. Cat said, standing up and walking over to the edge of the Hokage's head backwards, arms outspread. You ready? He said, walking back past Naruto, who had stood up and followed Cat to his position further back from the edge. He turned and ran past the boy, jumping over the edge, arms spread. Just as he was nearing the bottom of the mountain, he rearranged his body and slowed his descent using chakra and landed smoothly at the base of the mountain. It's just like flying. Cat called up to Naruto. More like falling, Naruto shouted down. That's what I said, Cat muttered. Trust me. I'll catch you, promise, he shouted up. Naruto looked around himself. He shook his head and moved away from the edge towards the tree line. Turning, he ran back and jumped over the edge. The wind flying past him was exhilarating. Smiling, he closed his eyes, allowing the sensation to overcome him. With feline grace he only ever displayed around Cat, Naruto maneuvered his body so that he would land perfectly on the ground next to Cat. Show off, Cat muttered, swiping his hand through Naruto's hair. Naruto pulled out the green goggles that Cat had given him and placed them around his neck before moving them up his forehead where they sat, keeping his hair away from his face almost like a forehead protector. Smiling, he hugged Cat tight. Thank you, Cat, Naruto whispered as he held Cat tightly. Line. Coming out of the bedroom, Naruto looked around. He couldn't find anyone. It was slightly strange. He could have sworn that someone was here. How else would he have got in the house? Checking more rooms upstairs, he found them all empty. Moving downstairs, he checked the kitchen and found nothing. Then he approached the living room. As he entered the doorway, he found Konohamaru coloring on the floor with Asuma sitting next to him trying to get him to color the picture correctly, and their mum was reading a book in the armchair next to them. "Uncle Suma, don't you have your own house now?" Naruto said, causing all occupants in the room to jump 3 feet in the air. Turning around, 3 sets of wide eyes stared at him. "Naruto," Sayuri called, clutching her hand to her heart. "When did you come in?" "Asuma was meant to collect you later." "About 5 minutes ago, and I was early. Cat found me at the gates earlier anyway. He gave me these goggles as a birthday present. He said I shouldn't hide from my birthday." "So you wouldn't mind if I gave you a birthday present too?" Konohamaru asked cheekily, getting up and pulling a present off the sofa and handing it to Naruto. Opening it carefully, Naruto found a plant. "He's called Mr. Uki. I picked him out myself." Konohamaru smiled at Naruto. "Thanks, Ko, I'll look after it," Naruto replied, smiling. "Well, I guess you wouldn't mind these then?" Asuma said, holding out the rest of the presents to him. Sayuri, who had disappeared when Konohamaru gave Naruto his present, emerged from the kitchen carrying a cake. "Are you going to open them then, Naruto?" "Don't forget the cake, we've got candles for you to blow out," she said, holding it out to him with 7 candles lit atop the cake. The door opened to reveal the third entering the house. Walking through to the living room, he found 2 grandchildren covered in cake. "Hey, isn't the cake supposed to go in the mouth, not around it?" the third smirked. "Granddad," Konohamaru called, running into the third's outstretched arms. Naruto turned around to see the embrace. Smiling, the Hokage released Konohamaru and stretched his arms out again. "Where's my hug?" he pouted playfully at Naruto. Smiling, Naruto ran into the open arms. "Happy birthday, kiddo. So what did you get?" he asked. "A plant called Mr. Uki. A new sketchpad, a set of kunai and shurikun for when I start school, this neat walrus sleeping hat and pajamas, and a little orange book, but Mom threw it away." The plant was from Ko, the sketchpad from everybody, the kunai set from Uncle Suma, and Mom got me the rest, he giggled. "And the goggles?" the third inquired. "Orange book? Not Icha. How does it keep getting into his hands?" the third wondered. "They're from Cat, he gave me them first," he said almost definitely. "Got room for one more?" the third asked, holding out a set of keys. Did you buy me the apartment I wanted?" Naruto stammered. "Cat helped, I just finalized it." "You're still welcome at our homes, Naruto. We wouldn't expect it any other way," Sayuri stated. "Now where's that cake?" the third asked, picking Konohamaru up and throwing him to Asuma. "Thanks, Cat," Naruto whispered, taking Sayuri's hand and returning to the living room to be with his family and for more cake. "I called my granddad when I was little, and even now he will stand there with arms outstretched till I give him a hug." That's the end, guys. If you enjoyed, then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.